The sun beat down on Dry Creek like a judgment, turning the main street into a ribbon of cracked earth and broken promises. Clara Mallory's boots scraped against the dirt as Hank Cordell and his brother Jesse hauled her forward, one man on each arm. Her face was streaked with dust and dried blood from where Hank had backhanded her that morning, but her eyes, those eyes still had fight in them. "You should have signed when we asked nice," Hank said, tobacco staining the corner of his grin. He was a big man, the kind who'd learned early that size meant power in places where law didn't reach. "Now you get to be an example." Clara spat at his feet. "That land's mine. My father broke his back on it for 20 years. "Your father's dead," Jesse cut in. "He was thinner than Hank, meaner in the way skinny dogs are mean. Dead men don't own nothing." The cross stood waiting in the town square, rough-hewn timber still dark with stains from the last person they'd tied there. That had been old Samuel Chen, the laundry owner, 3 months back. He'd made it 2 days in the sun before his heart gave out. Nobody talked about Samuel anymore. Talking about the dead just reminded you that you might be next. 2 more men waited by the cross, Dalton Pike and Curtis Wade. Dalton was cleaning his fingernails with a knife, barely looking up as they approached. Curtis, youngest of the 4, had the decency to look uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to say a word. A crowd had gathered, not because they wanted to watch, nobody wanted to watch. But Hank had made it clear years ago that absence was the same as opposition, and opposition got you put on that cross yourself. So they came. Shopkeepers and farmers, the banker and the undertaker, women with children clinging to their skirts, all of them looking anywhere but at Clara's face. Sheriff Tom Pruitt stood at the edge of the crowd, his badge catching the sunlight. He'd been a good man once, or so people said. That was before the Cordells came to town, before he learned that a tin star doesn't stop a bullet, and 4 men willing to kill are worth more than 1 man trying to keep the peace. Now he just stood there, jaw tight, hand nowhere near his gun. "String her up," Hank ordered. Dalton moved first, grabbing Clara's left arm and forcing it against the crossbeam. The rope was rough hemp, the kind that left burns. Curtis took her right arm, pulling it taut. Jesse produced more rope from his belt. "Please," Clara said, and she hated herself for saying it, but fear had a way of crawling up your throat when you were about to be tied to the same cross that killed a man. "Please, just let me keep the land. I won't cause trouble. I'll stay quiet." Hank leaned in close. His breath smelled like rot-gut whiskey and decay. "Should have stayed quiet yesterday. Should have stayed quiet when we came by with the papers. But you had to go running to the sheriff, didn't you?" He glanced at Pruitt. The sheriff looked away. "That's what I thought," Hank continued. "See, girl, the problem ain't that you won't sign. The problem is you made me look weak. Can't have that. Not in my town." "This isn't your town," Clara said. Hank hit her. Not as hard as he could have. He wanted her conscious for what came next, but hard enough to split her lip. Blood ran down her chin, mixing with the dust already there. The ropes went on. Left wrist, right wrist, pulled tight until the hemp cut into skin. They didn't tie her feet. That would be too merciful, too quick. No, they wanted her standing, weight on her legs until her muscles gave out, until the sun and thirst and exhaustion did their work. From the crowd, a woman's voice called out, "Let her go, Hank. For pity's sake, she's just a girl." Hank turned, scanning faces. "That you, Margaret? You want to take her place?" Silence. Margaret Thornton, the seamstress, dropped her gaze to the dirt. Her husband put a hand on her arm. "Not now," the gesture said. "Not ever." "That's what I thought," Hank said again. He was good at reading silence, at knowing when he'd won. "Anybody else want to speak up for the thief?" Nobody did. They never did. Jesse stepped back, admiring their work. Clara hung there, arms spread, the position already starting to ache in her shoulders. The cross was shorter than you'd think. Her feet touched the ground, but just barely. In an hour, her legs would be screaming. In 3 hours, she'd be begging. That's how it always went. "The documents," Claire gasped. "You took my father's land documents. I want them back." Hank laughed, a sound like gravel in a bucket. "Those papers? They're gone, girl. Burned. Your land belongs to Mr. Blackwood now. Legal and proper." "Legal," Claire repeated, the word bitter on her bleeding tongue. "You beat my father half to death, then burned his house down with him inside. That's not legal." "Prove it," Dalton said, speaking for the first time. His voice was soft, almost gentle, which made it worse somehow. Go on, show us proof. She couldn't. The proof had died with her father, had turned to ash in the fire that took him. All she had left was the knowledge of what happened, and knowledge without evidence was just noise. Hank walked a slow circle around the cross, making sure everyone could see. 3 days, he announced to the crowd. Girl gets 3 days of water and shade breaks because we ain't monsters. If she signs the transfer papers, she comes down. If she don't, he shrugged. Well, you all remember Samuel. Someone in the crowd made a small sound, quickly stifled. Yes, they remembered Samuel. Curtis Wade shifted his weight, looking like he wanted to say something. Hank caught the movement and shot him a look that killed whatever words might have been forming. Curtis was young, maybe 22, and he hadn't fully learned yet that mercy was a luxury they couldn't afford. But he was learning. The church bell rang noon. In the saloon across the street, someone had started playing a piano, badly. Life in Dry Creek went on because life always went on, even when pieces of it were dying in the square. Sheriff Pruitt finally moved, taking 3 steps forward. For a moment, just a moment, something like hope flickered across faces in the crowd. Maybe this was it. Maybe today was the day he'd remember his oath. Hank, Pruitt said, voice rough from disuse. This ain't right. Hank turned, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. Sheriff Pruitt, didn't see you there. You got a problem with how I handle my business? She's a citizen of this town. She's got rights. She's a thief, Hank corrected. Stole livestock from Mr. Blackwood's ranch last week. We got witnesses. That's a lie, Clara said, but nobody was listening to her anymore. Pruitt's hand drifted toward his gun, then stopped. You could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. 4 men against 1, all of them faster draws than he'd ever been, all of them willing to kill. His wife was at home. His daughter was 7 years old. Good men died for nothing in towns like this, and their families suffered long after the burying was done. The hand dropped. Thought so, Hank said softly. You got something to say, Sheriff. You say it to Mr. Blackwood. He's the one paying your salary these days. It was true, though nobody liked admitting it out loud. After the town council had dissolved, after those mysterious fires that took out 2 councilmen's homes, Blackwood had stepped in to help with town finances. Now the sheriff's pay came from Blackwood's account at the bank, and everyone knew what that meant. Pruitt walked away. He didn't run, didn't hurry, but he walked away, and Clara watched him go, the last small piece of hope cracking in her chest like ice in spring. The crowd began to disperse. They'd seen what they needed to see, learned what they needed to learn. Keep your head down. Don't make trouble. Sign the papers when the Cordells come calling. By sundown, the square was nearly empty. A few people lingered, the undertaker making mental measurements, and old Ben Watts, the drunk who lived behind the general store. Ben wasn't afraid of the Cordells because he'd already lost everything worth losing. He sat on the steps of the boarding house, sipping from a bottle wrapped in brown paper, watching Clara with rheumy eyes. Hang in there, girl, he called out, and then laughed at his own joke. Get it? Hang in there? Clara didn't respond. She was trying to find a position that didn't make her shoulders scream, but there wasn't one. The physics of the cross were designed for suffering, for breaking a person down piece by piece. Night came slowly, the way it does in summer. The heat didn't break, just shifted from blazing to suffocating. Hank had kept his word about water. Curtis brought her a dipper around 8 o'clock, held it to her lips while she drank. He didn't meet her eyes. You could help me, Clara whispered. Curtis's hand trembled slightly. I can't. You mean you won't? Same thing out here, he said, and walked away. The stars came out hard and bright and indifferent. Clara's legs were already shaking, muscles cramping from standing in one position. She tried to rest her weight on the ropes, but that just made her wrists bleed. There was no comfortable way to do this. That was the point. Somewhere in town, a dog barked. In the saloon, men were laughing. The piano had stopped, replaced by the sound of bottles clinking and chairs scraping. Normal sounds. Life going on while she died. She thought about her father. Jacob Mallory had been a hard man, not given to softness or sentiment, but he'd loved that land. 40 acres of decent grazing, a stream that ran year-round, soil that would grow anything if you worked it hard enough. He'd bought it 20 years ago with money saved from working mines in Nevada, had built a house with his own hands, had turned scrubland into something worth having, and then Blackwood had decided he wanted it. Clara had been in town when it happened, buying supplies. She'd come home to find the house burning, her father lying in the yard with his skull cracked open. The doctor said he must have fallen, hit his head on the porch steps. Tragic accident. The fire must have started from a knocked-over lantern. Nobody believed it, but nobody said different either. You didn't question what happened in Dry Creek. You just buried your dead and moved on. Except Clara hadn't moved on. She'd gone to Sheriff Pruitt with her suspicions, had demanded an investigation. Pruitt had looked tired, so tired, and told her there was nothing he could do. No evidence, no witnesses, just a grieving daughter seeing conspiracy and tragedy. So she tried to keep the land herself, had moved into the barn, started working the cattle, refused to leave. And Blackwood had sent the Cordells to convince her otherwise. The first time they had just talked, polite-like, explained that Mr. Blackwood was prepared to make a generous offer, more than the land was worth. She'd refused. The second time, they'd burned the barn. She'd barely gotten the horses out. The third time, they'd come with papers transferring the deed to Blackwood's name, along with a story about stolen livestock. Sign or be arrested. She'd refused again. Now here she was. Hours passed. Her throat went dry, then parched, then felt like sand and broken glass. Her shoulders stopped aching and went numb, which was somehow worse. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. That couldn't be good. She dozed standing up, jerking awake whenever her legs started to give out. In those half-dreams, she saw her father's face, heard his voice. "You're a Mallory. We don't quit." But he died, hadn't he? And dying seemed a lot like quitting. Dawn came gray and cheerless, light bleeding into the sky like a wound. Curtis brought more water. The town stirred to life. Merchants opening shops, farmers heading to fields, children running in the street until their mothers called them back. Don't go near the cross. Don't look at the girl. Clara was still alive. She wasn't sure if that was victory or defeat. Around mid-morning, she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to Dry Creek's usual rhythm. Hoofbeats, slow and steady, coming from the east road. Everyone heard it. Heads turned. Work stopped. A rider appeared at the edge of town, sitting easy in the saddle. He was hard to make out at first, just a silhouette against the sun. But as he got closer, details emerged. Tall, lean, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat despite the heat. His horse was a roan mare, dusty from travel. The man himself looked like he'd been riding for days, maybe weeks, with the kind of stillness that comes from spending too much time alone. He rode straight down the main street, not hurrying, not slowing. People stepped out of his way without thinking about it. There was something in the way he carried himself, something that said he didn't ask for permission. The stranger stopped his horse 20 feet from the cross. For a long moment, he just sat there, looking, taking it in. His face was weathered, hard to age, could have been 30, could have been 50. His eyes were gray, the color of winter sky. Then he dismounted, smooth and unhurried, and walked closer. Clara lifted her head, trying to focus through the pain and exhaustion. "Help," she managed. "Please." The stranger studied her face, then the ropes, then the cross itself. He reached up and touched one of the old stains on the wood, rubbing it between his fingers. "How long you been up there?" "Since yesterday noon." He looked at her wrists, at the blood. "What'd you do?" "Wouldn't give up my land." The stranger nodded slowly, like that made sense, like he'd seen it before. "Who put you here?" "The Cordell brothers. They work for—" "I didn't ask who they work for," he interrupted. "I asked who put you here." Clara understood. Names mattered. Hank and Jesse Cordell, Dalton Pike, Curtis Wade. 4 men. Yes. The stranger turned, looking at the town around them. People had stopped pretending to work, were openly staring now. He seemed to count them, assess them, and find them wanting. "Where's the law?" he asked. "Sheriff's office, across from the saloon." He didn't move yet, just stood there in the dust, thinking. "You got family?" "Had a father. He's dead." "The land worth dying for?" The question should have been easy. It wasn't. Clara's shoulders were on fire, her legs barely holding, and she could feel something fundamental giving way inside her. But she thought of her father's hands, calloused and scarred from work. She thought of 20 years of sweat in that soil. Yes, she said. The stranger almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. All right then. He walked toward the sheriff's office, boots kicking up small clouds of dust. His hand rested on the gun at his hip, not threatening, just there, ready. Sheriff Pruitt was in his office, going through papers that didn't need going through, trying not to think about the girl in the square. When the door opened, he looked up, ready to make excuses, and found himself facing a man he'd never seen before. Morning, Pruitt said carefully. You the sheriff? That's right, Tom Pruitt. And you are? The stranger didn't answer. He moved to the window, looking out at Clara on the cross. That girl out there. She under arrest? It's complicated. I didn't ask if it was complicated. I asked if she's under arrest. Pruitt set down his pen. This stranger had a way of asking questions that felt like traps. There were accusations, livestock theft. The men who made the complaint, they have a right to tie people to crosses? Silence. Is that the law here? The stranger pressed. Public torture for accused criminals? Now hold on. I'm holding, the stranger said. I'm listening real careful to how a lawman explains why he let that happen. Pruitt stood up, trying to reclaim some authority. Listen, friend, you're new here. You don't understand how things work. Mr. Blackwood owns most of the land around Dry Creek. The Cordells work for him. When there's disputes... Disputes? The stranger repeated. That what you call it when 4 men beat a woman and tie her up to die? I don't like it any more than you do, but then cut her down. It wasn't a request. Pruitt heard it in the man's voice, saw it in his eyes. This stranger had done violence before, knew exactly how to do it again, and was maybe one wrong word away from doing it right here. I can't, Pruitt said, and hated how weak it sounded. The Cordells, you don't know what they're capable of. I got a pretty good idea, the stranger said, but here's what I know for certain. That girl dies on that cross. You killed her, not them. You? The man wearing that badge. You understand? Pruitt's hand dropped to his gun, then stopped. The stranger hadn't moved, hadn't threatened, but something about him made drawing seem like suicide. Who are you? Pruitt asked. Nobody important, the stranger said. He turned and walked out, leaving Pruitt alone with his cowardice. Back in the square, the stranger approached the cross again. Clara had her eyes closed, conserving energy. When she opened them, he was standing right there. Where are these 4 men? He asked. The Cordells will be at Blackwood's ranch. The other 2 usually drink at the saloon starting around noon. He checked the sun. Maybe another hour. The land documents, where would they be? Hank said they burned them. He lied. Men like that always keep insurance. Where would he keep papers he wants hidden? Clara thought about it, working through the fog of pain. There's a safe in Blackwood's ranch house. Hank goes there every few days. The stranger nodded. All right, I'm going to need you to stay quiet for a bit longer. I'm not going anywhere, Clara said, and there was something dark in her laugh. He studied her face, measuring. You going to make it? Don't have much choice. There's always a choice, he said. You made yours yesterday when you didn't sign. Question is whether you can stick to it. Who are you? Clara asked. Why do you care? The stranger looked at her for a long moment. I don't like bullies, he finally said. Never have. He walked away, heading toward the saloon. Word had spread by now. There was a stranger in town asking questions about the Cordells. That never went well. People cleared the street like they knew what was coming. The saloon doors swung open. Inside, Dalton Pike and Curtis Wade sat at a table near the bar, cards between them. They looked up as the stranger entered. Help you? Dalton asked. His knife was on the table, within reach. The stranger walked to the bar, ordered whiskey. When the bartender, a nervous man named Frank, poured it, the stranger didn't drink, just stood there, turning the glass in his hand. You boys work for Hank Cordell, he said. Not a question. Might, Dalton said. Why? Got a girl tied up in the square. She's a thief. That right? The stranger set down his glass. Seems excessive, don't it? Tying people to crosses? Curtis shifted in his seat. He didn't like where this was going. Dalton, though, he just smiled. You got a problem with how we handle our business? I do, the stranger said. I want you to cut her down. Dalton laughed. Curtis didn't. The younger man had instincts that the others lacked. had spent enough time around dangerous people to recognize one when he saw it. "Let's go," Curtis said quietly. "Hank can handle this." But Dalton was already standing, hand moving toward his gun. "I don't think you understand how things work around—" He never finished the sentence. The stranger moved. Not fast, that wasn't the right word. Efficient. His hand was on his gun and firing before Dalton's fingers touched leather. The shot took Dalton in the chest, punching him backward into the table. Curtis went for his gun, got it halfway out before the second shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He hit the floor, gasping. The stranger walked over, kicked Curtis's gun away. "You're young," he said, "so I'm giving you a choice. Stay down or end up like your friend." Curtis stayed down. His shoulder was on fire, blood spreading across his shirt, but he was alive and smart enough to want to stay that way. "Where's Hank Cordell?" the stranger asked. "Ranch," Curtis gasped. "Blackwood's ranch, 3 miles north. The other one? Jesse?" "With him." The stranger reloaded his gun, unhurried. Behind the bar, Frank the bartender was pressed against the wall, hands up. The other patrons had scrambled for the exits, not wanting to be witnesses. "You tell Hank I'm coming," the stranger said to Curtis. "Tell him to have 4 coffins ready." Then he walked out, leaving one man dead and another bleeding on the saloon floor. The square was silent when he returned. Everyone had heard the shots, had counted them, was waiting to see who walked out. When the stranger appeared alone, the message was clear. He went to Clara, pulled out his knife. For a second, she thought he might, but no. He cut the ropes. Clara collapsed. Her legs couldn't hold her, hadn't been able to for hours. The stranger caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently to the dirt. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Give me a minute." She was free. Her wrists were bleeding, her shoulders wouldn't work right, but she was free. "You killed them." "One of them. The other one's going to deliver a message. Hank will come for you, for both of us." "That's what I'm counting on," the stranger said. He helped her to her feet, supported her weight as they walked to his horse. The mare stood patient, like she'd seen this before. The stranger helped Clara mount, then swung up behind her. "Where are we going?" Clara asked. "To get your papers back," he said. "Then we're going to have a conversation with Mr. Blackwood." As they rode out of town, heading north toward the ranch, Sheriff Pruitt stood in his office window, watching them go. His hand was on his badge. After a long moment, he took it off and set it on his desk. Some choices you could live with. This one, he wasn't so sure. The stranger and Clara disappeared into the dust, riding toward a reckoning that had been coming since the first person in Dry Creek decided that silence was safer than standing up. Behind them, in the saloon, Curtis Wade wrapped his shoulder and started walking. He had a message to deliver, and Hank Cordell wasn't going to like it one bit. 4 coffins, the stranger had said. Curtis had a feeling he knew who they were for. The road to Blackwood's ranch cut through scrubland that hadn't seen rain in weeks. Clara sat in front of the stranger on his horse, trying to hold herself upright despite every muscle in her body screaming protest. Her wrists were still bleeding, leaving dark spots on her torn dress. The stranger didn't speak, just kept the horse moving at a steady pace, eyes scanning the horizon. "You got a name?" Clara finally asked. Her voice came out rough, throat still raw from thirst. "Does it matter? I'd like to know what to call the man who's probably going to get himself killed on my account." He was quiet for a moment. "John'll do." "That your real name?" "It's a name." Clara didn't push it. Out here, plenty of men ran from things they didn't want found. Names were the first thing you left behind. "Well, John, you should know what you're riding into. Hank Cordell's killed 3 men that I know of. Jesse's got at least 2. They're fast, they're mean, and they don't follow rules." "Neither do I," John said. "I noticed." She shifted, trying to find a position that didn't make her shoulders throb. "You military? You move like military." "Long time ago." "Which war?" "The one that didn't fix anything." His tone made it clear the subject was closed. They rode in silence for a while. The sun was climbing toward noon, heat coming off the ground in waves. In the distance, Clara could see the shape of Blackwood's ranch house, a sprawling structure that didn't belong out here. 2 stories, painted white, with columns like some plantation house from back east. Blackwood had built it to show everyone he'd made something of himself, but all it really showed was that he had more money than sense. There's going to be more than just Hank and Jesse, Clara said. Blackwood keeps hired guns, at least 6, maybe more. How many can shoot? I don't know. Most of them are just for show, I think, to scare people. Scared men pull triggers too, John said. Sometimes faster than the ones who know what they're doing. Clara looked back at him. His face was set, calm, like they were riding to church instead of into what might be a bloodbath. Why are you doing this? You could have just cut me down and left. Nobody would have blamed you. Probably not. So why? John was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, had a sister once, about your age. Some men decided they didn't like how she looked at them, tied her to a fence post outside town, left her there for 3 days in the snow. He paused. Found her too late. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, just don't die on me, that's all I ask. Die on... They were getting close now. Clara could see movement around the ranch house, men on the porch, horses in the corral. The place was built like a small fort, which was probably intentional. Blackwood didn't just want land, he wanted empire, and empires needed defending. John reined in the horse about 100 yards out, studying the layout. The main house sat in the center, with a large barn to the left and a bunkhouse to the right. There were maybe 8 or 9 men visible, some armed, some not. 2 were on the porch with rifles. You see Hank or Jesse? John asked. Clara scanned the faces. No, but that's Blackwood on the porch, the one in the vest. Marcus Blackwood stood like a man who owned everything he surveyed, which in Dry Creek he pretty much did. He was in his 50s, gray-haired and well-fed, wearing an expensive suit that was ridiculous in this heat. The kind of man who made money off other people's suffering and convinced himself he was doing them a favor. We're going to ride in slow, John said. You stay on the horse no matter what happens. If shooting starts, you ride hard back toward town. Don't look back, don't stop. Understand? I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. The hell I will. John almost smiled again. Stubborn. My father used to say it was my best quality. He was probably right. They rode forward, hooves crunching on the dry earth. The men on the porch noticed them immediately, rifles coming up. Blackwood raised a hand, stopping them. He was curious, Clara could see it. Curious about this stranger who'd shot his way through town. They stopped 20 feet from the porch. John sat easy in the saddle, hands visible, not reaching for his gun, but not scared either. Mr. Blackwood, he said, I believe you have something that belongs to this lady. Blackwood's eyebrows went up. Do I now? And what might that be? Land documents, deed to 40 acres south of town. Ah, Blackwood smiled. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. That land was legally transferred to me after its previous owner passed away. All very proper, very legal. Funny thing about that, John said. The previous owner's daughter here says she never signed anything. The daughter is confused. Grief does strange things to the mind. Clara spoke up, voice sharp despite her exhaustion. I'm not confused. You had my father killed and you stole his land. Blackwood's smile didn't waver. That's a serious accusation, Miss Mallory. You have proof, I assume. The proof is in your safe, Clara said. Real documents showing my father's ownership. You kept them instead of burning them, like Hank said. Insurance, in case you ever needed to prove the land was worth stealing. For the first time, Blackwood's expression shifted. Just a flicker, but it was there. You're making quite a scene over nothing, my dear. Perhaps you should go home, rest. This ordeal has clearly been taxing. I don't have a home, Clara said. You burned it. Another accusation without evidence. Blackwood turned his attention to John. I don't believe we've been introduced. We haven't. You're not from around here. No. And yet you've inserted yourself into local business. Killed one of my men, wounded another. That's a problem. Your men tied a woman to a cross, John said. That's a bigger problem. Blackwood's smile turned cold. You're new here, so let me explain how things work. This is my town, my land, my law. Whatever happened in Dry Creek happened because I allowed it or ordered it. When a woman refuses to acknowledge legal property transfers, there are consequences. Where's Hank Cordell? John asked. Around. I'd like to speak with him. I'm sure you would. Blackwood glanced toward the barn. Hank, we have visitors. The barn doors opened. Hank Cordell walked out, Jesse beside him. Both were armed, both looked ready. When Hank saw Clara on the stranger's horse, his face went dark. "Well now," Hank said. "Didn't expect to see you again, girl. Thought you'd be begging to sign by now." "She's done begging," John said. Hank's eyes shifted to him. "You must be the one Curtis was babbling about. The man who wants 4 coffins." "That's right." "Awful confident for someone outnumbered 10-1. John looked around slowly, counting. "I count 9. Curtis makes 10, but he's in town bleeding. Dalton's dead. That leaves 8 of you and 2 of me." "2?" Hank laughed. "You counting the girl? She can barely sit up." "I'm counting the bullets in my gun," John said. "And I only need 4. The air went tight. Men started shifting positions, hands moving toward weapons. On the porch, Blackwood stepped back, getting out of the line of fire. He'd seen enough gunfights to know when one was about to start. "Hold on now," Blackwood said. "Let's not be hasty. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement. Mr. I'm sorry. I didn't catch your name." "I didn't throw it." "Yes." "Well, anonymous gentleman then. You want the land documents? Fine, I'll give them to you. Miss Mallory can have her precious 40 acres. All she has to do is leave Dry Creek and never come back." Clara stiffened. "That land is mine. I'm not leaving." "Then we have nothing to discuss," Blackwood said. He nodded to Hank. "Handle this." Hank's hand dropped to his gun. So did Jesse's. The other men started spreading out, trying to get angles. John didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there, like he was waiting for something specific. "Last chance," Hank said. "Right out now. Leave the girl. Nobody else has to die." "Can't do that," John said. "Then you're a fool." "Probably." Hank drew. Fast, practiced, the kind of draw that came from years of killing. His gun cleared leather and was coming up when John moved. It wasn't speed so much as timing. John's draw was smooth, economical, and his first shot caught Hank in the chest before the bigger man's gun was level. Hank stumbled backward, surprise on his face, and hit the ground hard. Jesse was faster than his brother, got his gun up and fired. The shot went wide. He'd rushed it, panicked. John's second shot didn't miss. Jesse spun sideways, gun falling from his hand, and dropped to his knees. The other men froze. They'd seen fast draws before, but this was something different. This was a man who'd done this so many times it was muscle memory, instinct, like breathing. "Who's next?" John asked. His voice was calm, almost conversational. Nobody moved. These were hired guns, not killers. They got paid to look tough and intimidate farmers, not to die for someone else's property dispute. "Anybody?" John's gun was still in his hand, still ready. One of the men on the porch, a young kid with a rifle, slowly set his weapon down and raised his hands. "I ain't dying for $12 a week," he said. Another man followed suit, then another. Within seconds, all of them were stepping back, hands up, making it clear they were out. Blackwood stood alone on his porch, face red with fury. "Cowards, all of you, I pay you to—" "You pay us to look tough," one of the men said, "not to get shot by someone who actually knows what he's doing." John dismounted, keeping his gun trained on the group. "Clara, you know where the safe is?" "Office, 2nd floor. Go get your papers." She slid off the horse, legs nearly giving out. Her shoulders were screaming, wrists still bleeding, but she was standing. That was something. She walked toward the house, past the men who'd stepped aside to let her through. Blackwood moved to block her. "You can't just—" "Step aside," Clara said. "This is my house, my property. You have no right—" She hit him. Not hard. She didn't have the strength, but hard enough. Blackwood stumbled back, hand going to his mouth, more shocked than hurt. "That's for my father," Clara said, and walked past him into the house. The office was easy to find, biggest room upstairs with a desk that probably cost more than her father's entire house. The safe was behind a painting of Blackwood shaking hands with some politician. Subtle. Clara didn't know the combination, but she didn't need it. She found a letter opener on the desk and started working on the painting's frame. It came off easier than expected. Blackwood clearly didn't think anyone would dare rob him in his own house. The safe was newer, better made. She stared at it for a moment, mind working through possibilities. Then she heard footsteps behind her. She spun, ready to fight, and found one of the hired men standing in the doorway. The young one who'd set down his rifle first. Easy, he said, hands up. I'm not here to stop you. Then why are you here? I know the combination. He walked to the safe, started turning the dial. Blackwood made me watch while he put stuff in, said if anything ever went missing, he'd know who to blame. Why help me? The young man, he couldn't have been more than 20, looked at her. Because I got a sister about your age, and if someone did to her what they did to you, I'd hope a stranger would help her too. The safe clicked open. Inside were papers, lots of them, deeds, contracts, letters. Clara started pulling them out, scanning quickly. Most were legitimate business, boring stuff about cattle sales and water rights. But then she found it, her father's deed. Original, signed, dated, proving ownership of 40 acres, free and clear. And underneath it, more deeds, other properties. Other names she recognized, the Morrison family's ranch, the Chen property in town. At least 7 different parcels, all with legitimate ownership documents that should have prevented Blackwood from taking them. He kept all of them, Clara breathed. Every single property he stole, he kept the proof. Insurance, the young man said, in case someone bigger than him ever came asking questions. Clara gathered the papers, all of them. This wasn't just about her land anymore. This was evidence of everything Blackwood had done, every family he'd destroyed. Downstairs she could hear raised voices. Blackwood was yelling, probably at John, probably threats. She hurried back down with the papers clutched to her chest. In the yard, the situation had shifted. Blackwood was on the porch, face purple with rage. You think you can just ride in here and take what's mine? You have any idea who I am? A thief, John said. That's all you are. I built this town. I brought jobs, opportunity, progress. You brought fear, Clara said, stepping out of the house. She held up the papers. And I've got proof. Blackwood's expression changed. The bluster dropped away, replaced by something colder, more calculating. Those are private documents, stolen from my property. They won't hold up in any court. Maybe not, Clara said, but folks in Dry Creek will recognize their own deeds. The Morrison Ranch? That's Jim Morrison's signature. He died in a fire 3 months after you took his land. The Chen property? Samuel Chen died on that cross in town, and here's the document proving he owned that land free and clear. Some of the hired men were looking at each other now. They'd known Blackwood was ruthless, but this was different. This was murder, systematic and planned. You can't prove anything, Blackwood said, but his voice had lost its certainty. I don't have to prove it to a judge, Clara said. I just have to show people the truth. Hank was still alive, barely. He'd dragged himself to a sitting position against the barn wall, hand pressed to the hole in his chest. Blood was spreading between his fingers, too much blood. Boss, he gasped, help me! Blackwood didn't even look at him. You failed. You're useless to me. I did everything you asked, Hank said. Every dirty job, He coughed. More blood. Please. Pathetic, Blackwood said. John walked over to Hank, knelt down beside him. You got maybe 5 minutes. Want to spend them begging him, or you want to make them count? Hank looked up at him, eyes glazed with pain and shock. What do you want? The truth. On record. Everything Blackwood ordered you to do. He'll kill me. You're already dying, John said. Not cruel, just factual. Question is whether you go out as his dog or as a man who finally did one decent thing. Hank's breathing was getting shallow. He looked at Blackwood, at the man he'd served for 5 years, the man who wouldn't even help him now. Something shifted in his face. Get paper, Hank said. I'll talk. One of the hired men ran to get writing materials. Hank started talking, words coming out in gasps. The Morrison fire, Blackwood's order. The Chen murder, Blackwood's idea. Claire's father, beaten by Hank himself on Blackwood's command, house burned while he was still inside. 7 murders, dozens of thefts, all laid out in Hank's dying confession while one of the hired men wrote it down. When Hank finished, he looked at Clara. I'm sorry, he said, for what it's worth. It's not worth much, Clara said, but it's something. Hank died 30 seconds later. Jesse had already gone, bleeding out quiet while everyone else was focused on his brother. The Cordell brothers, who'd terrorized Dry Creek for years, were both dead in the dirt of Blackwood's ranch. Blackwood stood very still, watching his empire crack apart. This doesn't change anything, he said. I have lawyers, connections. You're just a girl and a drifter. Nobody's going to believe. They'll believe Hank's confession, Clara said. They'll believe their own property deeds, and they'll believe their eyes when they see you run out of town. I'm not going anywhere, Blackwood said. This is my ranch, my land. John finally spoke. You got about 30 seconds to start packing, or you can join the Cordells in the ground. Your choice. You can't threaten me. I'll have the federal marshals. 30 seconds, John repeated. Blackwood looked at him, really looked, and saw something there that made his next words die in his throat. This wasn't a man who made threats. This was a man who made statements and then followed through. This isn't over, Blackwood said, but he was already backing toward the house. Yes, it is, Clara said. It's been over since the moment you decided my father's life was worth less than land. Blackwood went inside. They could hear him moving around upstairs, the sounds of hasty packing. The hired men started drifting away, getting their horses, ready to move on. The young one who'd helped Clara paused. What now? He asked. Now we go back to town, Clara said, and we tell everyone what happened here. They gonna believe it? They'll want to, John said. That's usually enough. 20 minutes later, Blackwood came out with 2 bags and a face like stone. He climbed into his carriage without a word, snapped the reins, and drove away. Nobody stopped him. Nobody said goodbye. Clara stood in the yard holding the papers that proved everything, surrounded by the bodies of the men who'd made her life misery. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. You all right? John asked. I don't know, Clara said honestly. I got what I wanted. Why don't I feel better? Because getting justice doesn't undo what happened, John said. It just stops it from happening to the next person. They rode back to Dry Creek slower than they'd left. Clara was in bad shape, kept swaying in the saddle. John rode close, ready to catch her if she fell. The town saw them coming from a mile off. Word had spread. Curtis had talked before passing out from blood loss, told everyone about the stranger and the gunfight in the saloon. Now here was that stranger riding back with Clara Mallory and a stack of papers. The whole town gathered in the street. Sheriff Pruitt was there, badgeless, looking uncertain. Margaret Thornton and her husband. Frank from the saloon. Old Ben Watts, sober for once. Everyone who'd watched Clara get tied to that cross. Everyone who'd stayed silent. Clara dismounted with John's help. Her legs were shaking, vision going gray at the edges, but she stayed upright. She held up the papers. Blackwood's gone, she said. Her voice carried in the silence. The Cordells are dead, and I have evidence of every property Blackwood stole, every person he killed to get it. Murmuring spread through the crowd. People pressed closer, wanting to see. Clara picked out Jim Morrison's son in the crowd. Tommy, your father's ranch deed. He owned it legal, never signed it away. She held out the document. Tommy Morrison took it with shaking hands. He told me he sold it, said it was his choice. He was forced, Clara said. Just like my father. Just like Samuel Chen and everybody else who got in Blackwood's way. She went through the papers one by one, returning deeds to families who'd thought they were lost forever. Some people cried. Some just stood there, stunned. The weight of what Blackwood had done and what they'd allowed was settling on the town like snow. When Clara finished, she turned to Sheriff Pruitt. I have Hank Cordell's deathbed confession. Names, dates, everything. You want to be sheriff again? This is your chance. Do your job. Pruitt looked at the papers, then at the townspeople. I should have done it sooner. Yes, Clara said. You should have. But you can start now. Pruitt took the confession, read it. His hands tightened on the paper. I'll need to send this to the territorial judge, get proper warrants issued, make this legal. You do that, Clara said. Then she swayed, and John caught her before she hit the ground. Someone get the doctor, John said. Now. They carried Clara to Doc Harrison's office above the general store. The doctor took one look at her wrists, her shoulders, the dehydration and exhaustion, and shook his head. She needs rest, real rest. Not an hour, not a day, weeks. Will she be all right? John asked. Eventually, if she's lucky. Doc Harrison started cleaning the wounds. What happened out at Blackwood's ranch? Justice, John said. The messy kind. He left Clara in the doctor's care and walked back out into the street. The crowd was still there, but the mood had shifted. People were talking now, voices rising. Some were angry. At Blackwood, at themselves for not acting sooner. Some were scared about what came next. Margaret Thornton approached John. "What you did today, that took courage." "Wasn't courage," John said. "Just couldn't walk away." "That's courage," Margaret said. "The kind we forgot we had." John didn't respond. He was looking at the cross in the square, still standing where they'd left it. A reminder of what this town had been. Tommy Morrison and a few other men were gathering around it now. They had axes. Without a word spoken, they started chopping. The cross came down in pieces, wood splintering, old blood finally washing away in the dust. Sheriff Pruitt approached John, badge back on his chest. "I owe you an apology." "You owe Clara an apology," John said, "and her father, and everyone else you failed." "I know." Pruitt looked older than he had that morning. "I let fear make me useless. That's on me. What are you going to do about it?" "My job," Pruitt said. "Starting with making sure Blackwood's ranch gets divided up legal. Those deeds Clara brought back, they need to be returned proper, registered, protected. And if Blackwood comes back, then I arrest him," Pruitt said. No more looking away. John studied him, measuring. "You mean that?" "I do." Pruitt met his eyes. "You're leaving, aren't you?" "Soon. Town could use a man like you. Deputy's position is open." "I'm not a staying man," John said. "Didn't think so." Pruitt held out his hand. "Thank you anyway." They shook. Pruitt walked away to start organizing the return of stolen property, to begin the long work of rebuilding trust. John went back to check on Clara. She was sleeping, Doc Harrison said. Wounds cleaned, bandaged, nothing that wouldn't heal given time. She'd been asking for John before she passed out, wanted to say thank you. "She'll get her chance," the doctor said. "You staying in town?" "For a bit?" "Good. She'll want to see you when she wakes up." John left the doctor's office and walked to the saloon. Frank was cleaning blood off the floor where Dalton had died. He looked up when John entered. "Whiskey?" Frank asked. "Yeah." Frank poured, hand steadier than it had been earlier. "Hell of a day." "It was." "You really think things will change? Town like this, people get used to keeping their heads down." "Maybe," John said. "But they took that cross down. That's a start." He drank his whiskey, feeling the burn. Outside, the sun was starting to set, painting Dry Creek in shades of red and gold. It looked almost pretty, if you didn't know what had happened here. The door opened. Curtis Wade limped in, arm in a sling, face pale from blood loss. He saw John and stopped. "Easy," Frank said. "He's not here to finish the job." Curtis approached slowly. "I delivered your message. About the coffins." "I know. You only needed 2. "Others decided to be smart," John said. "You included." Curtis sat down, careful of his shoulder. "I wanted to say what we did to that girl, to all those people. That wasn't right. No, it wasn't. I knew it then. I just didn't. I couldn't." He trailed off, looking for words that didn't exist. "You were scared," John said, not accusation, just fact. "Yeah. What are you going to do now?" Curtis looked at his ruined shoulder. "Can't shoot anymore, can't hire out his muscle. Guess I'll have to find honest work." "Might not be so bad," John said. "Might not," Curtis agreed. He stood up, wincing. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you came to town. Somebody needed to." He left. Frank poured John another drink. "You know people are going to want to buy you drinks all night. Town hero and all. I'm not a hero. Tell them that." But they came anyway. Tommy Morrison, wanting to buy him dinner. Margaret Thornton, bringing pie she'd baked. Old Ben Watts, offering a place to sleep that didn't cost money. One by one, the people of Dry Creek tried to say thank you in the only ways they knew how. John accepted the thanks with quiet nods, uncomfortable with the attention. He wasn't used to being thanked. Usually he rode into town, did what needed doing, and left before anyone could get too grateful. But Clara had asked for him, and he'd promised himself he'd make sure she was all right before moving on. So he stayed. Night fell. The saloon filled up, not with drunks trying to forget, but with people talking about the future, about who would run for town council now that Blackwood was gone, about how to make sure this never happened again, about building something better. John sat at the bar, listening. This was the part that came after the violence, the part he was never around to see. The hard work of rebuilding, of people finding their courage again. Around midnight, Doc Harrison came to find him. "She's awake, asking for you." John followed him upstairs. Claire was sitting up in bed, wrists bandaged, looking exhausted but alive. When she saw John, she smiled. "They told me what you did at the ranch," she said. "Got my papers back. Got justice for my father." "You got it yourself," John said. "I just cleared the way." Still, she held out her hand. He took it, careful of her injuries. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Doc says I need to rest for weeks. Says my shoulders might never work quite right again." "Could be worse." "Could be dead," Clara agreed. "You staying in town? For a bit? And then?" "Then I move on. I always do." Clara studied his face. "You know, we could use someone like you here. Town's going to need protecting while it gets back on its feet. Sheriff offered me a deputy job." "What'd you say?" "I said I'm not a staying man." "Why not?" John was quiet for a moment. "Because places like this, they're better off building themselves back up without someone like me around. I'm good at breaking things, not so good at the fixing part." "You fixed plenty today," Clara said. "Today was breaking," John corrected. "What happens tomorrow, next week, next year, that's the fixing. And that's on you folks, not me." Clara squeezed his hand. "Will you at least stay until I'm back on my feet? I'd like to say a proper goodbye." "I can do that." "Good." She leaned back against the pillows, eyes already closing. "Thank you, John, for giving me a chance to stand up." "You were always going to stand," John said. "You just needed someone to cut the ropes." She was asleep before he finished the sentence. John stayed a moment longer, then left her to rest. Outside, Dry Creek was settling in for the night. Lamps glowed in windows. Somewhere, a child laughed. Normal sounds, the kind you took for granted until they were gone. John walked back to the boarding house where Ben Watts had offered him a room. Tomorrow, people would want to talk more, to plan, to figure out what came next. But tonight, the town could breathe. 4 men were dead. A tyrant had fled. And for the first time in years, Dry Creek belonged to the people who actually lived there. It wasn't a happy ending. Those didn't exist in places this broken. But it was a chance. And sometimes, a chance was all you needed. John lay down on the narrow bed in the boarding house and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the night was quiet. No screams, no gunfire, no sound of someone dying on a cross. Just silence. The good kind. Morning came too early, sunlight cutting through the thin curtains of the boarding house like a knife. John was already awake, had been for an hour, listening to the town stir to life. The sounds were different than yesterday, less cautious. People moved with something that might have been hope, or at least the memory of it. He dressed and went downstairs. Ben Watts was in the kitchen, frying eggs that looked older than they should be. The smell filled the small room, mixing with coffee that had been sitting on the stove too long. "Morning," Ben said. He wasn't drunk, which was notable. "Sleep all right?" "Well enough. Town's buzzing already. Word got out about what happened at Blackwood's ranch. Some folks are saying you're the best thing to happen to Dry Creek in 10 years. Ben cracked another egg into the pan. Others are worried about what comes next. "What do you think?" Ben considered the question while scraping eggs onto 2 plates. "I think we got a chance. First one we've had in a long time. Question is whether we're smart enough to take it." They ate in silence. The eggs were terrible, overcooked and undersalted, but John didn't complain. He'd eaten worse. Outside, the street was already busy. People were gathering near where the cross had stood, talking in clusters. Sheriff Pruitt was there, looking official in a way he hadn't yesterday. When he saw John, he waved him over. John finished his coffee and went out. The morning air was already warm, promising another scorching day. "Morning," Pruitt said. Got a situation." "What kind?" "The kind where people want things done fast, and I'm trying to explain that law doesn't work that way." He gestured to the crowd. "Half the town wants Blackwood's property divided up today. The other half wants to make sure we do it legal so it can't be challenged later." "Which half is right?" "Both, unfortunately." Pruitt pulled out a rolled paper from his coat. "I sent a rider to the territorial capital last night. Should reach the judge in 3 days, maybe 4. Until we get official word on how to handle this, I can't just start handing out land. Tommy Morrison pushed forward from the crowd. My father's deed says that ranch is mine. Why do I need a judge to tell me what I already know? Because if you take it without legal process, Blackwood can claim theft and get federal marshals involved, Pruitt said. Then we're all in a worse position than before. Blackwood's gone. He ran like a coward. Doesn't mean he won't come back with lawyers and guns, Pruitt said. We do this right, or we risk losing everything we just won. The crowd wasn't happy, but they were listening. That was progress. John stayed quiet, watching the dynamics. This was what happened after the violence, the hard part, where nobody got shot, but everyone had to figure out how to live together. Margaret Thornton spoke up. What about the Cordells' property? They had a place south of town, didn't they? They did, Pruitt confirmed. No heirs that I know of. That land will probably go to auction. Who gets the money? Town treasury, most likely. Could use it to rebuild, maybe hire a proper deputy. Pruitt glanced at John. Or two. John shook his head. Still not interested. Had to try, Pruitt said. A young woman John hadn't seen before pushed through the crowd. She was maybe 17, thin and sunburned, wearing a dress that had been mended too many times. What about Blackwood's house, his ranch? What about it? Pruitt asked. Can't just sit empty. Place is huge. Could house a dozen families. Murmuring spread through the crowd. The girl had a point. Blackwood's ranch was the biggest property for 50 miles, and now it sat abandoned except for the bodies still cooling in the yard. Need to bury them first, someone said. The Cordells and Pike. Can't just leave them. I'll handle it, the undertaker said. He was a thin man named Robert Finch, always looked half dead himself. Question is, who pays for the coffins? Town will, Pruitt said. Can't let bodies rot just because we didn't like the men in life. 4 coffins, Ben Watts said, looking at John. Just like you promised. Only needed 2, someone else pointed out. Close enough, Ben said. The conversation went on, people arguing details and logistics. John slipped away, heading back toward Doc Harrison's office. He wanted to check on Clara before the day got away from him. She was sitting up when he arrived, eating soup that the doctor's wife had brought. Her color was better, but her hands shook slightly when she lifted the spoon. The damage from the cross went deeper than just rope burns. You look like hell, Clara said when she saw him. You don't look much better. She almost smiled. Fair enough. Doc says I can get up and move around tomorrow if I'm careful. Another week and I should be mostly functional. Good. Heard there's a mess down at the square. Everybody arguing about property. Always the way, John said. Easy part's done. Now comes the hard part. Clara set down her spoon. I've been thinking about my father's land. 40 acres, good water, decent grazing. It's too much for one person to work. You planning to sell? Thinking about it. Or maybe split it. Give some to families that need it. Tommy Morrison's got 3 kids and no land now that his father's place is tied up. Margaret Thornton's husband could use grazing for his horses. That's generous. It's practical, Clara corrected. I can't work that land alone, and I don't want to. Rather see it used by people who'll appreciate it. Your father wouldn't have agreed. My father's dead because he tried to hold on to everything himself, Clara said. Maybe if he'd shared more, built more connections, Blackwood wouldn't have found it so easy to isolate him. John sat in the chair beside her bed. You thought about what you're going to do after you heal? Stay here. Help rebuild. This is my home, for better or worse. Could leave. Start fresh somewhere else. Could, Clara agreed. But then Blackwood wins. He drove me off my land, out of my town. No, I'm staying. She looked at him. What about you? Told you, I move on. When? Soon as I know you're all right. I'm all right now. You can barely hold a spoon without shaking, John said. Clara looked at her trembling hands. That'll pass. Maybe, maybe not. He wasn't being cruel, just honest. Point is, you need time. I can spare a few days. And then you disappear like you were never here. That's the idea. Why? Clara asked. You did something good here. Why not stay and see it through? John was quiet for a moment. Because people like me, we're good at breaking things. solving problems with violence. But once the violence is done, we don't have much use. And if we stay too long, eventually someone needs breaking again, and we oblige because it's what we know. Better to leave before that happens." "You really believe that?" "I've seen it enough times." Clara shook her head. "I think you're making excuses. I think you're scared." "Of what?" "Of staying, of being part of something, of people depending on you for more than just your gun." She met his eyes. "You saved my life. You saved this whole town. But the thought of actually living here, being one of us, that terrifies you." John didn't answer because she was right, and they both knew it. A knock on the door interrupted them. Sheriff Pruitt stuck his head in. "Sorry to intrude." "Clara, how you feeling?" "Like I got tied to a cross and left to die," Clara said. "What do you need, Sheriff?" "Got news. Ryder came back from the Capitol faster than expected. Judge is sending a circuit magistrate. Should be here by tomorrow evening. He'll sort out the property disputes, make everything legal." "That's good news," Clara said. "Gets better. Judge also issued a warrant for Marcus Blackwood's arrest. Murder, theft, fraud, conspiracy. List goes on for 3 pages. Pruitt looked pleased with himself. "He shows his face in this territory again. I can arrest him legal and proper." "He won't come back," Clara said. "Probably not," Pruitt agreed. "But if he does, we're ready." After Pruitt left, John stood to go. Clara caught his hand. "Stay for dinner tonight. Doc's wife is cooking something that isn't soup, and I'd like the company." "All right." "And John, thank you for telling me the truth about why you leave. Most people would have lied." "I'm not most people." "No," Clara said. "You're really not." The rest of the day passed in a strange rhythm. John wandered the town, watching people work. The general store was doing brisk business, selling lumber and nails to folks fixing up properties that had been neglected under Blackwood's reign. The saloon was quieter than usual, Frank having decided not to open until evening as a mark of respect for the dead. The undertaker was busy with the 4 bodies. John went to check on the progress, found Robert Finch measuring Hank Cordell's corpse with professional detachment. "Never thought I'd bury all 4 of them in one day," Finch said. "Figured they'd get me one at a time, spread out over years." "Life's unpredictable. Death, too, apparently." Finch made a note on his paper. "You want to say anything at the service? Being as you killed 2 of them?" "No. Didn't think so. Most folks don't." He moved to Jesse's body. "You know what's strange? Nobody's claimed them. No family, no friends. Just bodies that need burying." "That's what happens when you make fear your only currency," John said. "When you die, nobody mourns you. They just stop being afraid." The burial was scheduled for late afternoon before the heat became unbearable. John didn't plan to attend, but something pulled him there anyway. Maybe curiosity about who would show up, or maybe just the need to see it finished. Turned out half the town came. Not to mourn, nobody was mourning, but to witness. To make sure the Cordells and Dalton Pike really were dead, really were going in the ground. Robert Finch said a few words, the bare minimum required by decency. No talk of virtues or redemption, just acknowledgement that 4 men had lived and now they hadn't. The graves were dug on the edge of the cemetery, far from the respectable plots. Nobody wanted them close to their own dead. As the first shovel of dirt hit Hank Cordell's coffin, Curtis Wade showed up. He stood at the back of the small gathering, arms still in a sling, face bruised from his own brush with death. He didn't say anything, just watched until all 4 graves were filled. After, he approached John. "Strange, isn't it? Watching men you worked with get buried. You feel bad about it?" Curtis considered the question honestly. "No, I feel relieved, and that makes me feel bad. You're young enough to find another path," John said. "Don't waste it." "What path did you find?" "Still looking," John admitted. Curtis nodded and walked away. He'd survive, John thought. Kid had enough sense to know when to quit, which was more than most gunfighters ever learned. The sun was setting when John made his way back to Doc Harrison's office for dinner. Clara was up and dressed, moving slowly, but moving. Her wrists were still bandaged, and she favored her left shoulder, but she was on her feet. "You look better," John said. "Liar, but I appreciate it." She gestured to the small table where Doc's wife had set out dinner. Nothing fancy. Chicken, potatoes, some vegetables from someone's garden. They ate mostly in silence, comfortable in a way that surprised John. He wasn't good at comfortable. He was better at tense, ready, prepared to move. But Clara had a way of making silence feel less like waiting for violence and more like just existing. I've been thinking about what you said, Clara broke the quiet. About being good at breaking things but not fixing them. And? I think you're wrong. She took a bite of chicken, chewed thoughtfully. You fixed me. Cut me down, gave me a chance to stand. That's fixing. That was just removing an obstacle. Everything's an obstacle until it's not, Clara said. You gave me back my land, but more than that, you gave this town back its spine. We were all so scared, so beaten down. You showed us we didn't have to be. That won't last, John said. Fear has a way of creeping back. Maybe. But now we know it can be beaten. That's worth something. She set down her fork. You know what I'm going to do with my father's land? You said you were thinking about dividing it. I'm going to keep half, work it myself. The other half, I'm giving to families that need it. Tommy Morrison gets 10 acres. Margaret Thornton's husband gets 10. The last bit goes to Curtis Wade. John raised an eyebrow. The man who helped tie you to that cross? The man who was too scared to say no, yes, but also the man who brought me water when I was dying. Who could have shot you in the back at Blackwood's ranch, but didn't? She met John's eyes. People deserve second chances. Don't you think? Depends on the person. Well, I think Curtis deserves one. He can't hire out as a gun anymore with that shoulder. Might as well learn to farm. You're either very forgiving or very foolish, John said. Maybe both, Claire admitted. But I'm alive to be either, and that's because of you. After dinner, they sat on the small porch outside the doctor's office. The town was settling in for the night, lamps being lit, families gathering. Normal life, the kind that had been missing from Dry Creek for too long. When are you leaving? Claire asked. Day after tomorrow, probably. Once the magistrate arrives and gets things sorted. Will you at least say goodbye? I will. They sat in silence for a while longer. Then Clara said, Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. Your sister, the one who died, what was her name? John was quiet for so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Sarah. She was 19. I'm sorry that happened to her. Me too. Is that why you do this? Ride into towns and fix things? I don't fix things, John said again. I just make the bad men stop. Same thing, from where I'm sitting. It's not, John insisted. Fixing means building something better. I'm just clearing away the rubble. What gets built after, that's not my doing. But without you clearing the rubble, nothing could be built at all, Clara said. So maybe you're part of the fixing whether you want to admit it or not. John didn't have an answer for that. The next day brought the magistrate, a stern-faced man named Walter Price, who'd been dealing with frontier disputes for 15 years and had the tired eyes to prove it. He set up in the sheriff's office and started working through the property claims one by one. Clara presented her father's deed along with Hank's confession. Price read both carefully, asked a few questions, then stamped the deed with an official seal. Property is yours, Miss Mallory. Legal and proper. Thank you. Don't thank me. I'm just doing paperwork. Thank whoever got these documents back. Clara glanced at John, who was standing by the door. I have. Price worked through the rest of the claims throughout the day. The Morrison Ranch, the Chen property, all the land Blackwood had stolen through fear and violence. Each deed was verified, stamped, returned to its rightful owner. By evening, the magistrate had reshaped the ownership of Dry Creek, putting it back in the hands of the people who actually lived there. The question of Blackwood's personal property was trickier. The ranch, the house, the assets, legally, they still belonged to him, warrant or no warrant. Until he's convicted of a crime, his property can't be seized, Price explained to the gathered town council. Best we can do is place it in trust until the matter is resolved. And if he never comes back to face charges? Pruitt asked. Then after 7 years, it can be declared abandoned and auctioned off. Price saw the faces around him fall. I know that's not what you want to hear, but that's the law. 7 years is a long time for a house to sit empty, Margaret Thornton said. It is, Price agreed. However, there's nothing stopping someone from being appointed as a caretaker, someone to maintain the property, keep it from falling into ruin. That person could live there, work the land as long as they understand they don't own it. Eyes turned to Clara. She shook her head. Not me. I've got my own land to worry about. What about families that need housing? Tommy Morrison suggested. We got at least 5 families in town living in places that aren't fit. Could use Blackwood's bunkhouse, maybe part of the main house. Price considered it. I can authorize that as caretaking. Draw up a list of who stays there, what work they do to maintain the property. When Blackwood's convicted, if he's convicted, the court will sort out final ownership. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The meeting broke up with people already making plans, figuring out who would move where, how to divide up the work. John found Clara afterward, walking slowly through town. Her movements were still stiff, painful, but she was walking. "How you feeling?" he asked. "Like I got run over by a horse, but I'm upright, so that's progress." She turned to face him. "You're leaving tomorrow, aren't you?" "Probably." "I wish you'd stay." "I know, but you won't." "No." Clara nodded, accepting it. "Will you do something for me before you go?" "Depends what it is." "Ride out to my father's land with me. I want to see it again, see what I'm fighting to keep." "You should rest." "I've been resting for 2 days. I need to move, need to see something other than these 4 walls. She met his eyes. "Please." John agreed because he couldn't think of a good reason not to. They borrowed horses from the livery, the owner refusing payment, saying it was the least he could do after what John had done for the town. The gesture made John uncomfortable, but he took the horses anyway. The ride to Clara's land took about 30 minutes, following a creek that sparkled in the afternoon sun. The land when they reached it was everything Clara had described: 40 acres of decent grazing, the stream running through the middle, soil that looked like it might grow something if you worked it right. The house was gone, burned to its foundation, but the barn still stood, partially damaged but salvageable. Clara dismounted carefully, walked through the ruins of her childhood home. "I was born here," she said, "in that corner where the bedroom used to be. My mother died when I was 6, right there by the fireplace. My father worked himself half to death on this land for 20 years. "And now it's yours," John said. "Now it's mine," Clara agreed. She picked up a piece of charred wood, turned it over in her hands. "I'm going to rebuild. Not the same house. I don't want the same house. Something new, smaller, maybe. Something I can manage alone." "You won't be alone. Half the town owes you their land back." "That's different than having family." She dropped the wood. "You ever think about settling down? Having a place that's yours?" "No." "Why not?" "Because places make you vulnerable," John said. "You start caring about land, about a house, about the people around you, and suddenly you've got something to lose, something people can take from you. That's a lonely way to live." "It's a safe way to live." Clara turned to face him fully. "Your sister, Sarah, when she died, did you have a place? People you cared about?" John's jaw tightened. "I had a ranch. Small one just outside Kansas City. Was building it up, planning to bring Sarah there to live with me once I got it established." "And after she died?" "Sold it, left, never went back." "Because you didn't want to lose anything else," Clara said softly. "But John, by not having anything, you're losing everything. Every town you ride through, every person you help, you leave them all behind. You're so afraid of grief that you've made yourself incapable of anything else." "That's not your concern." "I know it's not, but I'm saying it anyway because someone should." She stepped closer. "You're a good man. You could have a good life if you'd let yourself. But you won't, and that's tragic in its own way." John didn't respond. What could he say? She was right, and they both knew it. They stood there in the ruins of her father's house, 2 people marked by violence, trying to figure out what came after. "I should get back," Clara said finally. "Doc will worry." They rode back to town in silence. When they reached the doctor's office, Clara dismounted with John's help. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for everything." "You're welcome. Will I see you before you leave?" "I'll come by in the morning. Say a proper goodbye." Clara nodded, then on impulse stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. "Try to find some peace, John, wherever you end up." She went inside before he could respond. John returned the horses and walked back to the boarding house. Ben Watts was on the porch, working through a bottle that was still mostly full. Progress, of a sort. "Leaving tomorrow?" Ben asked. "How'd you know?" "You got the look." The one folks get when they're about to run. Ben took a drink. Can't say I blame you. Town's gonna get boring now that all the excitement's over. Boring's not so bad, says the man who lives for the opposite. Ben studied him. You know what your problem is? I'm sure you'll tell me. You think you don't deserve peace. Think you gotta keep paying for whatever you did that got your sister killed. So you wander from town to town, fixing problems that aren't yours, never staying long enough to build anything. You drunk, Ben? Not yet. Still got half a bottle left. He raised it in salute. But I'm sober enough to see when a man's punishing himself. And you're punishing yourself harder than anyone else ever could. John didn't argue because he couldn't. He went to his room and lay down, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Clara's land and Sarah's grave and all the places he'd been that he couldn't remember the names of anymore. Morning came gray and cool, the first hint that summer might eventually break. John packed his few belongings, settled his account with Ben, and went to say goodbye to Clara. She was up and dressed, moving with less pain than yesterday. When she saw him with his saddlebag, her face fell slightly, but she didn't argue. So, this is it, she said. This is it. Where will you go? West, probably. Heard there's trouble in some of the mining towns. Folks who could use help. There's always trouble somewhere, Claire said, and you'll always ride toward it. It's what I know. She handed him something, a piece of paper, folded. My father's deed. I made a copy yesterday with the magistrate's help. This is the original. Why are you giving it to me? Because it's proof that what you did here mattered, that it wasn't just violence for violence's sake. You gave me back my land, my future. I want you to have something to remember that by. John took the paper, unsure what to do with it. I'll probably just lose it. Maybe. Or maybe one day you'll look at it and remember that you did something good, that you made a difference. She stepped forward, took his hand. Try to remember that, John. When the road gets hard and you start thinking you're nothing but a killer, you're not. You're a man who helped people who couldn't help themselves. That matters. Take care of yourself, Clara. You too. He left before the goodbye could get harder. His horse was waiting at the livery, saddled and ready. He mounted up and rode out of town without looking back. The road stretched ahead, empty and familiar. John had ridden roads like this 100 times, leaving towns behind, moving toward the next problem. It was comfortable in its simplicity. No attachments, no complications, just him and the horse and whatever trouble waited around the next bend. He rode for an hour before he stopped, pulling out the deed Clara had given him. The paper was crisp, official, proof that 40 acres of land belonged to Clara Mallory, daughter of Jacob Mallory, deceased. Proof that what he'd done mattered. John folded the paper carefully and put it in his shirt pocket, close to his chest. He didn't know if he'd ever look at it again, didn't know if it would make a difference on the dark nights when he wondered why he kept doing this. But Clara had wanted him to have it, and that meant something. He urged his horse forward, west toward whatever came next. Behind him, Dry Creek was learning to stand on its own, learning that fear didn't have to rule, that people could choose courage if someone just gave them the chance. John had given them that chance, and maybe, somewhere in the endless miles ahead, he'd find his own. But not today. Today he just rode, the sun at his back, the road ahead, doing what he'd always done, moving forward, always forward. John made it 15 miles before he stopped. Not because the horse was tired, the mare had plenty left in her. Not because he needed rest. He stopped because something felt wrong, a nagging sense in his gut that had kept him alive through more gunfights than he could count. He dismounted near a creek, let the horse drink while he tried to figure out what was bothering him. The land here was open, rolling hills with scattered scrub brush. Good visibility in all directions, no obvious threats. But the feeling wouldn't leave. He pulled out Clara's deed, looked at it again in the fading light. The paper was already getting creased from his pocket, the ink still fresh enough to smudge if he wasn't careful. 40 acres. A future. A chance. And he'd ridden away from it without looking back, same as always. Ben Watts had called it punishment. Clara had called it fear. They were both right, probably. After Sarah died, John had made himself into something sharp and useful, a tool for fixing problems he couldn't fix in his own life. It worked, mostly. Kept him moving, kept him from thinking too hard about what he'd lost. But it didn't make him whole. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. John made camp, built a small fire, ate jerky that was too tough, and drank water that tasted like the canteen. Normal things. The routine of a man who lived on the road. He was checking his gun, habit, always check your gun before sleep, when he heard the hoofbeats. Multiple riders coming fast from the east, back toward Dry Creek. John doused his fire and moved into the brush, hand on his pistol. The riders appeared moments later, maybe 6 or 7 of them, pushing their horses hard. They rode past without seeing him, heading west, away from town. In the dying light, John caught a glimpse of the lead rider's face. Marcus Blackwood. John swore under his breath. The old man hadn't run as far as everyone thought, and now he was coming back with reinforcements. The smart thing would be to let them go. Blackwood was heading away from Dry Creek, probably planning to regroup somewhere else, maybe lawyer up in the territorial capital. Not John's problem anymore. But then he thought about Clara, still healing, barely able to hold a spoon without shaking. About Sheriff Pruitt, trying to rebuild law in a town that had forgotten what it looked like. About Tommy Morrison and his kids. About Margaret Thornton. About all the people who were just starting to believe they might be safe. John mounted his horse and turned back toward Dry Creek. He rode hard, cutting across country instead of following the road. The mare was strong, steady, didn't complain about the pace. They made the town by midnight, coming in from the south side. Dry Creek was dark, most buildings shuttered for the night, but there were lights in the saloon and a few houses. John went straight to the sheriff's office. Pruitt was asleep at his desk, head down on paperwork. John knocked hard on the doorframe, and the sheriff jerked awake, hand going to his gun. "Easy," John said. "It's me." Pruitt blinked, focusing. "John? Thought you left." "Did. Came back. Saw Blackwood on the road heading west. He had 6 or 7 men with him." That woke Pruitt up completely. "You sure it was him?" "Sure enough, they were riding like they had somewhere to be." Pruitt stood, strapping on his gun belt. "West, you said? That doesn't make sense. Capital's east. That's where his lawyers would be." "Unless he's not going to lawyers," John said. "What's west of here?" Pruitt thought about it. "Nothing much. Few small ranches, some mining operations." "Wait." His face changed. "The Johnson place. Old cattle ranch. Been abandoned for 2 years since the family moved to California. Big house, good water, defensible position." "He's setting up a base," John said. "Somewhere close enough to watch the town, but far enough to not get caught." "But why? He's got a warrant out. Coming back here is suicide." "Maybe he doesn't plan to come back personally. Maybe he's planning to send others." John moved to the window, looking out at the sleeping town. "You returned all that land today, made it legal. But legal only matters if you can defend it. What's stopping Blackwood from hiring guns to run everyone off again?" Pruitt's expression darkened. "Nothing. Nothing at all." "So he's going to do it again," John said. "Smarter this time. Won't use his own name, won't be directly connected. Just hire men to terrorize folks until they sign over their deeds to some company he controls." "We need to stop him." "We need proof he's planning it," John corrected. "Right now all we have is him riding west with some men. That's not a crime." "So what do we do?" John was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We go out there, see what he's up to. If he's just passing through, we let him go. If he's planning something, we gather evidence and bring it to the magistrate. Just the 2 of us against 7 or 8 men? You got a better idea?" Pruitt didn't. He grabbed his rifle, checked it was loaded. "Should we wake some of the townspeople? Get help?" "No, they're not fighters. They just get killed." John headed for the door. "Get your horse. We leave in 5 minutes." They rode out into the darkness, following the road west. Neither spoke. Both men focused on what lay ahead. The Johnson place was maybe 2 hours at a steady pace, but they took it slower, not wanting to announce their approach. The ranch appeared as the moon rose, a 2-story house that had seen better days, surrounded by collapsing outbuildings and broken fences. But there were lights in the windows, and horses in what was left of the corral. John and Pruitt dismounted a 1/4 mile out, tied their horses, and approached on foot. The ground was dry, noisy with every step, but they moved carefully, using what cover they could find. They got close enough to hear voices from inside the house. John motioned for Pruitt to circle around back while he moved to a window on the south side. The window was broken, covered with a scrap of canvas. John found a gap and looked through. Blackwood was there, standing by a table with a map spread out. The men with him were hard-looking types, not local ranch hands. Professional guns, the kind you hired when you needed people hurt. The town's vulnerable right now, Blackwood was saying. They think they've won, think they're safe. That makes them complacent. You want us to go in shooting? One of the men asked. He was tall, scarred, spoke with an accent John couldn't place. No, shooting brings federal attention. I want fear, not bodies. Blackwood pointed to spots on the map. These are the properties I need back. Morrison Ranch, the Chen Place, Mallory's 40 acres. You encourage the current occupants to leave. Burn a barn here, kill some livestock there. Make it clear that staying means suffering. And if they don't leave? Another man asked. Then you escalate, but carefully. No murders that can be traced back to me. Accidents, disappearances, that sort of thing. Blackwood's voice was cold, matter-of-fact, like he was discussing crop rotations instead of terror. I've already got a front company established in Denver. Once the land's abandoned, they'll buy it cheap from the county. All legal, all clean. What about the sheriff? The tall man asked. Word is he's trying to grow a spine. Pruitt's not a problem. He's one man with a badge. You're 7 professionals. If he interferes, handle it. Blackwood rolled up the map. I want you in position by tomorrow night. Start with the Morrison place. Kill their livestock, burn their barn, send the message clear. The men nodded, already planning. John had heard enough. He pulled back from the window, moving quietly toward where Pruitt should be. He found the sheriff crouched by the back door, face grim. You hear that? Enough, John whispered. We need to get back to town. Warn everyone. We should arrest him. We've got him planning crimes, conspiracy to... We've got nothing that will hold up in court, John interrupted. His word against ours, and he'll say we were trespassing, misheard, made it up. We need something concrete. Like what? Like catching them in the act, or getting one of those men to testify. John thought for a moment. Or we could end this another way. Pruitt looked at him. What are you suggesting? 7 men in there, 2 out here. We've got surprise on our side. That's suicide. Maybe. Maybe not. John checked his gun again, counting bullets. But if we let them ride into Dry Creek tomorrow, people die. Clara dies, probably. Those families that just got their land back lose everything again. And Blackwood gets away with it because he's not the one pulling the trigger. Pruitt was quiet, wrestling with it. He'd spent years avoiding this kind of decision, letting fear make his choices for him. But something had changed in him since Clara got cut down from that cross. Or maybe it had changed earlier, and he'd just been too scared to acknowledge it. All right, Pruitt said finally. What's the plan? I go in the front, you cover the back. Anyone tries to run, you stop them. You're going in alone against 7 men? I've done worse. When? John smiled, barely. I'll let you know after. He moved back toward the front of the house, Pruitt circling to his position at the rear. John took a moment to breathe, to center himself. This was the part he was good at, the part that didn't require thinking about the future or dwelling on the past. Just action, clean and simple. He kicked open the front door. The men inside went for their guns, but John was already firing. The first man went down before his pistol cleared leather. The second took a bullet in the shoulder and spun away. John dove behind an overturned table as return fire splintered the wood around him. The room exploded into chaos. Men were shouting, shooting, trying to find cover in a space that didn't have much. John shot a lamp, plunging half the room into darkness and confusion. Someone screamed as burning oil spread across the floor. At the back of the house, Pruitt opened fire through a window, catching one of Blackwood's men in the side. The sheriff wasn't a great shot, but he was competent, and at this range, competent was enough. Blackwood was screaming orders, trying to organize his men, but it was too late. John had the initiative, had created chaos, and in chaos he was comfortable. 2 more of Blackwood's guns went down, 1 dead, 1 wounded badly enough to be out of the fight. The tall, scarred man proved to be the best of them. He flanked wide, got an angle on John, and fired 3 quick shots. 1 grazed John's arm, burning a line across his bicep. John returned fire, hitting the man in the chest. He went down hard. That left 3, including Blackwood. They made a break for the back, running straight into Pruitt's fire. 1 went down immediately. The other dove through a window, glass shattering, and ran for the horses. Pruitt shot him in the leg. He fell, crawled a few feet, then gave up. Inside the house, Blackwood stood with his hands up, face white with shock and fury. "You can't do this. I have rights. I'll have you both arrested for assault, for—" "Shut up," John said. His arm was bleeding, not bad, but enough to be annoying. "Sheriff, you want to do the honors?" Pruitt came in through the back, rifle still raised. "Marcus Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 15 other charges I'll think of on the ride back." "This is illegal. You have no authority to—" "I've got all the authority I need," Pruitt said. He looked different now, sounded different, like he'd finally remembered what the badge meant. "Turn around." Blackwood turned, and Pruitt secured his hands with rope. The wounded men were moaning, bleeding, not a threat. The dead ones weren't a problem either. John checked each body, made sure no one was playing possum. "How's your arm?" Pruitt asked. "I'll live. You?" "I'm fine. Can't believe that worked." "Element of surprise," John said. "They weren't expecting a fight, weren't ready for it. Give men like that a second to think, and we'd be dead." They rounded up the survivors. 3 wounded, badly enough they couldn't run. 1 who'd given up when Pruitt shot his leg. With Blackwood, that made 5 prisoners. 2 dead stayed where they fell. Someone would have to come collect them later. The ride back to Dry Creek took twice as long with prisoners. They had to stop twice to keep the wounded men from bleeding out. Not out of mercy, but because dead men couldn't testify. Dawn was breaking by the time they reached town. Word spread fast. By the time they got to the sheriff's office, half the town was in the street. People stared at Blackwood in disbelief, at the wounded men, at John and Pruitt, both bloodied but upright. Clara was there, moving slowly but under her own power. When she saw Blackwood in rope, something fierce crossed her face. "You came back," she said to John. "Hadn't gotten far." "Why?" "Saw him heading west. Figured it wasn't over." She looked at Blackwood, at the man who'd ordered her father killed, who'd stolen land and lives and futures. "What happens now?" "Now he stands trial," Pruitt said, "along with his friends here. Magistrate Price is still in town. We'll get him, get statements, build a case that can't be dismissed." Blackwood finally spoke, voice dripping with contempt. "You think this changes anything? I have lawyers, connections, money. I'll be out by the end of the week." "Maybe," Pruitt said, "but you'll be out somewhere else. You're done in Dry Creek, done in this territory if I have anything to say about it." They locked the prisoners in the town's small jail. 3 cells, meant for drunks and petty thieves, now holding men who'd planned murder and arson. It was crowded, uncomfortable, and nobody cared. Doc Harrison patched up John's arm, tutting about the stupidity of riding into a house full of armed men. "You're lucky it was just a graze." "I'm always lucky," John said. "Luck runs out eventually." "Not yet, it hasn't." Magistrate Price was roused from sleep and brought to the jail. He took statements from John and Pruitt, from the wounded prisoners who were eager to cut deals, from Blackwood himself, who refused to say anything without a lawyer present. By noon, Price had enough to issue formal charges: conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit arson, attempted intimidation, and half a dozen other counts. The evidence was solid: the prisoners' own words, the map they'd found in the Johnson place, Blackwood's obvious connection to the whole operation. "This will go to trial in the territorial capital," Price said. "Probably take 6 months, maybe a year. But barring a miracle or serious corruption, Blackwood's going to prison." "And the others?" Pruitt asked. "Depends on how much they cooperate. The ones who testify against Blackwood might get lighter sentences. The ones who don't—" Price shrugged. "Attempted murder of a lawman carries a heavy penalty." The prisoners were loaded onto a wagon that afternoon, bound for the capital, under armed guard. Blackwood looked smaller somehow, diminished without his power and money to shield him. As they drove him away, he stared at the town he'd once controlled, and John saw something in his face that might have been regret, but was probably just rage. Clara stood next to John, watching the wagon disappear into the distance. "It's really over this time, isn't it?" "Probably. He might beat some of the charges. Might get out eventually, but he won't come back here." "How do you know?" "Because next time there won't be a warning. Next time I put him in the ground." John said it matter-of-factly, and Clara didn't doubt him for a second. The town celebrated that night, cautiously at first, then with growing enthusiasm as it sank in that Blackwood was really gone. Frank opened the saloon and refused payment for the first round. Margaret Thornton organized a potluck dinner in the street. Tommy Morrison played fiddle while children danced. It wasn't quite joy, too much had been lost for that. But it was relief and hope, and the beginning of something that might eventually become healing. John sat on the porch of the sheriff's office, watching it all from a distance. Clara found him there, brought him a plate of food. "You should be down there," she said. "They're celebrating because of you. They're celebrating because of themselves. I just cleared the way." "You keep saying that." Clara sat beside him. "Like you can't accept that you did something good." "I killed 2 men tonight, wounded 3 others. That's not good, it's just necessary." "It's both," Clara said. "Sometimes good requires hard choices." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the music, the laughter, normal sounds, the kind Dry Creek hadn't heard in years. "You're leaving again, aren't you?" Clara finally asked. "Should. Job's done." "Is it?" She turned to look at him. "Blackwood's gone, but the town still needs protecting. We don't have a deputy, don't have anyone who knows how to handle trouble if it comes back. Pruitt's learning. Pruitt's one man, and he's not you." She paused. "Stay. Just for a while. Help us get steady." "I'm not good at staying." "You're not good at leaving either," Clara said, "or you wouldn't have come back tonight." She had a point. John had ridden away, had made it 15 miles, had every intention of never seeing Dry Creek again. And then he'd turned around, ridden back into danger, risked his life for people he barely knew. Maybe Ben was right. Maybe he was punishing himself. Or maybe he was just tired of running. 1 month, John heard himself say. I'll stay 1 month. Help Pruitt train up a deputy, make sure things are stable. Then I'm gone." Clara smiled. 1 month, that's a start. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm John wasn't used to. Instead of riding from town to town, he stayed. Instead of solving problems with his gun, he helped build things. He taught Pruitt and 2 young volunteers, Curtis Wade, surprisingly, and Tommy Morrison's oldest boy, the basics of law enforcement. How to de-escalate conflicts, when to draw your weapon, when to walk away. Curtis turned out to be better at it than expected. The shoulder wound had killed his gunfighting career, but it hadn't killed his nerve. And he had something to prove, a need to show that he was more than Hank Cordell's sidekick. He worked harder than anyone, learned faster, took the job seriously. "You ever think you'd be teaching me to be a lawman?" Curtis asked one afternoon during shooting practice. "Can't say it crossed my mind," John admitted. "I almost killed you, you know. At Blackwood's ranch. Had my gun up, had a clear shot." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Curtis fired at a target, hit close to center. "Why didn't you kill me?" "In the saloon. You could have." "You were young and scared. Didn't seem worth it." "I helped tie Clara to that cross. And you brought her water, and you told me where to find Hank. People aren't all one thing." John loaded his own gun. "You get a second chance. Don't waste it." Curtis nodded, fired again. This time he hit dead center. Clara was healing slowly, her wrists scarred over, thick and ugly, but functional. Her shoulders still ached in the mornings, probably always would, but she was working her land, rebuilding her barn with help from Tommy and others in town. The house foundation was cleared, and they were planning to raise a new structure before winter. John helped when he could, though he was better with a gun than a hammer. He held boards while others nailed, fetched water, did the grunt work that didn't require skill. It felt strange being part of something being built instead of torn down. One evening, Clara found him sitting by the creek that ran through her property. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. "Not worth that much." She sat beside him. "You've been here 3 weeks. How much longer till your month's up?" "Week or so." "And then you're leaving." That was the deal. Deals can change. She picked up a stone, tossed it in the water. "Curtis is doing well. He'll make a decent deputy, but the town could still use you." "The town will be fine." "I know it will. I'm not asking for the town." She looked at him directly. "I'm asking for me." John felt something shift in his chest, uncomfortable and unfamiliar. "Clara, I know what you're going to say. You're not a staying man. You've got ghosts to run from. You're better alone. I've heard all the excuses." She moved closer. "But here's the thing. You've been here 3 weeks, and you haven't been miserable. You've taught those boys, you've helped rebuild, and I've seen you almost smile more than once. That doesn't sound like a man who's desperate to leave. It's not about being desperate. Then what is it about? John was quiet for a long time. I had a ranch once, people I cared about, a future planned out, and then men came and took it all away, and I couldn't stop them because I wasn't there. I was off doing something that seemed important at the time but wasn't. By the time I got back, my sister was dead and there was nothing left to save. So you made yourself into someone who saves other people's sisters, Clara said softly. Other people's towns. But never your own life because you don't think you deserve one. I don't. Why? Because you weren't there? Because you couldn't save Sarah? She took his hand. John, that's not how life works. You can't protect everyone all the time. You can only do your best and hope it's enough. And sometimes it's not, and that's terrible, but it doesn't mean you stop living. I'm not living. I'm just moving. Then stop moving, Clara said. Stay here. Build something. Let yourself be part of a community again. And when the next Blackwood comes along, when the next group of hired guns rides in, then we face them together, Clara said, as a town, as people who've learned to stand up. You taught us that. Now let us teach you something. What's that? That you don't have to do everything alone. The words hung in the air between them. John wanted to argue, to explain why she was wrong, why staying was impossible. But he couldn't find the words because he wasn't sure she was wrong. 1 more month, he said finally. Let me think about it. Clara smiled. 1 more month. That's progress. The final week of his original commitment passed quickly. Curtis and young Morrison, they'd started calling him Deputy Morrison, which made him puff up with pride, had learned enough to handle basic peacekeeping. Pruitt was more confident, less likely to freeze when challenged. The town had rebuilt most of what Blackwood had destroyed and, more importantly, had rebuilt its sense of self. On the last day of the month, John woke up planning to saddle his horse and ride west. He'd fulfilled his commitment, done what he said he'd do. Time to move on. But when he went to the livery, he found his horse already saddled. Clara was there, holding the reins. Figured you'd be leaving today, she said. Wanted to say goodbye proper. I didn't say I was leaving. Didn't say you were staying either. She handed him the reins. I'm not going to beg you, John. You're a grown man. You make your own choices. Clara, but I want you to know something. This town, we're grateful for what you did. We're better because you were here. And I'm better. You gave me my life back, my land, my future. I won't forget that. She stepped closer. And if you decide to ride out of here, I'll understand. But I'll also regret it. Because I think you could be happy here if you let yourself. And I think... She paused. I think I could make you happy. If you gave me a chance? John looked at her. Really looked. Saw the scars on her wrists, the strength in her eyes, the hope she was trying not to show. She'd been tied to a cross and left to die, had lost her father and her home, and she was still standing, still hoping, still willing to risk caring about someone like him. He thought about Sarah, about the ranch he'd sold, about all the miles he'd ridden and all the towns he'd left behind, about the deed in his pocket that was wearing thin from being folded and unfolded, about Ben Watts calling it punishment and Clara calling it fear. They were both right. He'd been punishing himself, been afraid to build anything new, because building meant risking loss. But loss was going to happen either way. At least if he stayed, if he tried, he'd have something worth losing. I need to check something, John said. He walked to the sheriff's office, Clara following. Pruitt was inside, organizing paperwork. He looked up when they entered. Leaving today? Maybe, maybe not. That deputy position still open? Pruitt blinked. You serious? Asking, not accepting, but yeah, I'm serious. It's yours if you want it. Pays not much, but you get a room above the office and meals at the boarding house. Pruitt studied him. What changed your mind? Haven't changed it yet. Still thinking. John turned to Clara. If I stayed, what would that look like? However you want it to look, Clara said. You could work with Pruitt, help keep the peace. You could help me rebuild my father's house. You could do both or neither. I'm not asking you to be anything other than yourself. And us? What about us? You said you could make me happy. What's that mean? Clara smiled. It means we take it slow. Get to know each other beyond crisis and violence. See if there's something there worth building on. She paused. No promises, no pressure, just a chance. John looked at the badge Pruitt was holding out, looked at Clara's hopeful face, looked out the window at the town that had learned to stand because he'd shown them they could. He'd spent years running, convinced that staying meant weakness, meant vulnerability, meant eventual loss. But maybe it also meant connection, community, a life that was more than just the road in the next fight. All right, John said, I'll stay. See how it goes. Clara's smile could have lit the whole town. Pruitt looked relieved, and John felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Not quite peace, not yet, but the possibility of it. He took the badge, pinned it to his shirt. It felt heavier than it should, like responsibility made manifest, but it also felt right. Welcome to Dry Creek, Deputy, Pruitt said, shaking his hand. Officially this time. John looked at Clara. You sure about this? I'm not easy to get along with. I've got habits that won't change overnight. I might still leave if things get hard, if you get scared, if the ghosts get too loud, Clara finished. I know. But you might also stay, and that's worth the risk. That evening, they sat on the porch of what would eventually be Clara's new house, watching the sun set over her 40 acres. The foundation was laid, the frame starting to rise. In a few months, it would be a home. You think you can be happy here? Clara asked. I don't know, John said honestly, but I'm willing to find out. That's all I'm asking. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. In town, lamps were being lit. Somewhere, a baby was crying. Normal sounds, everyday sounds, the kind that made up a life. John still had the deed in his pocket, folded and worn, proof that what he'd done mattered. But maybe he didn't need it anymore. Maybe the proof was all around him, in the rebuilt town, in Clara's healing scars, in the badge on his chest. He'd spent years convinced he didn't deserve peace. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe peace wasn't something you earned or deserved. Maybe it was just something you chose day after day, until one day you realized you'd built a life. Thank you, John said quietly. For what? For giving me a reason to stop running. Clara took his hand, scarred fingers intertwining with his own calloused ones. Thank you for cutting me down. They sat there as night fell, two damaged people trying to build something whole in a town that had learned the same lesson. It wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. And sometimes a start was all you needed. The first month was harder than John expected. Not the work. He knew how to keep peace, knew how to read trouble before it started. The hard part was the staying. Every morning he woke up in the room above the sheriff's office and fought the urge to saddle his horse and ride. Old habits died slow, and running was the oldest habit he had. But he stayed, partly because he'd given his word, partly because of Clara, mostly because something in him was tired of the road. Curtis proved to be a quick study as a deputy. He had the instincts for it, could read people's intentions in the set of their shoulders, the way their hands moved. One afternoon, they broke up a fight between two ranch hands without drawing weapons, just calm words and steady presence. You're getting good at this, John told him afterward. Curtis shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. Still feels strange. 6 weeks ago, I was on the other side of the law. 6 weeks ago, you were following orders from men who didn't deserve following. That's different than being bad. Is it? You tell me. You brought Clara water when you could have let her suffer. You didn't shoot me when you had the chance. Those weren't orders. Those were choices. John leaned against the wall outside the saloon. We're all the sum of our choices. You're making better ones now. Curtis thought about that. What about you? What choices led you here? Wrong ones, mostly. Until recently. Clara's a good woman. I know. You planning to marry her? John gave him a look. That's none of your concern. Fair enough, Curtis grinned. Just making conversation. The truth was, John didn't know what he was planning. He and Clara spent time together, dinners at her property, walks along the creek, quiet evenings watching her house take shape. It was comfortable. Easy in a way relationships had never been for him. But marriage was something else entirely, a permanence that still made him nervous. Clara never pushed. She seemed content to let things develop naturally. No pressure, no demands, which somehow made it harder because John kept waiting for the other boot to drop, for her to want more than he could give. One evening they were sitting on the porch of her nearly finished house when she brought it up. "You're still planning to leave, aren't you?" John didn't insult her by denying it. "Part of me is." "Which part?" "The part that's afraid." "Of what?" "Of this working, of building something and losing it." He looked at the house, at the work they'd done together. "Every time I let myself care about something, it gets taken away." "That's not how it works," Clara said. "Bad things happen whether you care or not. The only difference is whether you had something worth losing." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "It's supposed to make you think." She took his hand. "I could die tomorrow. The house could burn down. Blackwood could escape and come back with an army. Or we could have 50 good years together and die old in our sleep. You don't get to know which one happens. All you get to do is choose whether to try. And you think I should try." "I think you're already trying. You just won't admit it." She squeezed his hand. "You've been here 2 months, John. Your horse is still in the livery. Your room is still above the sheriff's office. You wear that badge every day and you haven't run yet. That's trying." She was right, and he knew it. Somewhere along the way, without meaning to, he'd started building a life in Dry Creek. It scared him, but not enough to make him leave. News came in the 3rd month that Blackwood's trial had begun. Magistrate Price sent word that the prosecution was going well, witnesses were testifying, and the evidence was damning. Barring something unexpected, Blackwood would spend the next 20 years in a territorial prison. The town celebrated quietly. No big party, no speeches, just a collective exhale, a release of tension they'd been holding for years. Tommy Morrison bought a round at the saloon. Margaret Thornton baked pies. Life went on, but easier now, lighter. Curtis got a letter from his sister. He had family he'd never mentioned, living 2 towns over. She wanted to visit, wanted to meet the brother who'd supposedly turned his life around. Curtis was nervous about it, kept asking John if he was really doing all right, if he was really a decent deputy. "You're doing fine," John assured him. "Better than fine. You're good at this." "What if she doesn't believe it? What if she thinks I'm still the same person who ran with the Cordells? Then you show her different. You let her see who you are now." John clapped him on the shoulder. "And if she can't see it, that's her problem, not yours." The sister came, a tired-looking woman with 3 kids and a husband who worked the mines. She spent 2 days in Dry Creek watching Curtis work, seeing how the town treated him. At the end of her visit, she hugged him tight and said she was proud. Curtis cried, not ashamed of it, and John looked away to give him privacy. That night at the saloon, Curtis was drinking water instead of whiskey. "You know what the difference is?" he asked John. "Between what?" "Between being Hank's man and being my own man." He stared at his glass. "Hank never cared if I lived or died, as long as I did what he wanted. But you, Pruitt, even Clara, you all care if I make it. That makes me want to be better." "That's what community does," John said. "Makes you accountable to something bigger than yourself." "Is that why you stayed? Community?" John thought about it. "Part of it. The other part is her." "Clara?" "Yeah." "You love her?" The question should have been intrusive, but coming from Curtis it felt genuine. "I think so, still figuring it out." Life advice from someone who's got no business giving it. Don't wait too long to figure it out. Good things don't wait forever. Curtis left to do his evening rounds, and John sat alone with his water, thinking about love and fear and the space between them. He'd spent so long running from attachment that he'd forgotten what it felt like to want to stay. The house was finished in the 4th month. Clara moved in with help from half the town, everyone bringing furniture they could spare, dishes and blankets, and the small necessities that made a house into a home. John helped carry her father's old desk up the stairs, careful with it because he knew what it meant to her. That night, Clara cooked dinner in her new kitchen. She invited John, Pruitt, Curtis, and a few others. They ate at a table that was too small for the number of people, passing dishes and laughing and telling stories. It felt like family, like belonging, and John realized with a start that he was happy. After everyone left, he helped Clara clean up. They worked in comfortable silence, washing and drying dishes, putting things away in cabinets that still smelled like fresh wood. "Thank you," Clara said when they finished. "For what?" "For being here. For staying." She dried her hands on her apron. "I know it's not easy for you. It's getting easier." "Is it?" "Yeah." He surprised himself by meaning it. I still get the urge to run sometimes, usually in the morning or when things feel too good, but it's getting quieter. What changed? John looked around the kitchen at the home she'd built from ashes and determination. I think I finally figured out that running doesn't actually protect you from loss. It just means you lose things before you get to really have them. Clara smiled. That's very philosophical for a gunfighter. I'm a deputy now. We're supposed to be wise. Is that what you are? A deputy? What else would I be? I don't know. Maybe a partner. Maybe someone who's building a life here. She stepped closer. Maybe someone who's ready to stop punishing himself for things he couldn't control. John pulled her close, rested his forehead against hers. I'm working on it. I know you are. They stood like that for a while, just breathing together, being together. It wasn't dramatic or perfect, but it was real. And real was better than the alternative. The 5th month brought trouble, but the manageable kind. A dispute over water rights between 2 ranchers threatened to turn violent. John and Curtis spent 3 days mediating, listening to both sides, finding a compromise that nobody loved but everyone could live with. It was boring, tedious work, the kind that didn't involve gunfire or heroics. But it mattered, kept the peace, prevented bloodshed. This is what law is supposed to be, Pruitt said afterward. Not shooting people, just helping them figure out how to live together. Less exciting than the other way, John said. Yeah, but you get to sleep better at night. John had to admit that was true. The nightmares that had plagued him for years were coming less frequently. He still dreamed about Sarah sometimes, about things he couldn't change. But the dreams were gentler now, less accusatory. Maybe he was finally forgiving himself. Or maybe he was just too busy building something new to dwell on what he'd lost. Clara's land was thriving. She'd split it like she'd promised, giving portions to Tommy Morrison and Curtis Wade. They worked it together, sharing labor and resources, building the kind of cooperative community that Blackwood's greed had destroyed. The crops were coming in, cattle were healthy, and Clara was talking about expanding, maybe buying the adjacent property if it came up for sale. You're turning into a rancher, John observed one afternoon while helping mend fence. Someone has to be, can't eat justice. She hammered in a post. Besides, I like it, like building something that lasts. Your father would be proud. Clara paused, looking out over the land. I think he would. Not just of the ranch, but of how we're doing it. Together instead of alone. That's the part he never understood. You're stronger when you're connected to people. Took me a while to learn that too, John admitted. And now? Now I'm trying to practice it. She smiled. How's that working out? Better than expected. The 6th month brought a visitor neither of them anticipated. A U.S. Marshal rode into town, official and serious, looking for Deputy John. He paused, realizing he didn't have a last name. Just John, John said. What can I do for you, Marshal? The Marshal's name was William Hayes, and he had the weathered look of a man who'd spent too many years chasing bad men through bad country. I'm here about Marcus Blackwood. His trial concluded last week. And? Pruitt asked. Convicted on all counts. 25 years hard labor, no possibility of parole. Hayes pulled out some papers. But before sentencing, he made some claims. Said you and Sheriff Pruitt executed 2 of his men without cause, that the whole thing was a setup. That's not what happened, Pruitt said. I know. I read the magistrate's report, talked to witnesses. Blackwood's lying through his teeth, trying to reduce his sentence by claiming judicial misconduct. Hayes put the papers away. I'm here to take official statements, make sure everything's documented properly for the appeals process. They spent the afternoon going through every detail of what happened at the Johnson Ranch. Hayes was thorough, asked hard questions, poked at inconsistencies that didn't exist. When he was done, he seemed satisfied. Blackwood's going to appeal, Hayes said. Men like him always do, but you've got a solid case. Multiple witnesses, physical evidence, his own men testifying against him. He's not getting out. What about his property? Clara asked. She'd come to the sheriff's office when she heard a marshal was in town. The ranch and assets are being liquidated. Money goes to pay restitution to his victims, then the remainder goes to the territorial treasury. Hayes consulted his notes. You're on the victims list, Miss Mallory. You should see some compensation, though probably not much. Lawyers and court costs eat up most of it. I don't want his money, Clara said. I just want to make sure he can't hurt anyone else. He can't. Hayes assured her. He's done. After the marshal left, the town felt lighter somehow. Blackwood wasn't just gone. He was officially, legally, permanently gone. No chance of return, no possibility of revenge. The chapter was closed. That evening, John found himself at Clara's house without consciously deciding to go there. She was on the porch, watching the sunset, and made room for him to sit beside her. "You all right?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About how this is the first time in my life I've seen something through to the end. Usually I ride in, break things, ride out before the consequences catch up. But this time I stayed, and I got to see it finished." "How does it feel?" John considered. "Good. Strange, but good. Like I was part of something instead of just passing through." "You were part of something. You are part of something." Clara took his hand. "This town, this life. You built it as much as anyone else. I just cleared the way. You did more than that, and you know it." She turned to face him fully. "John, you've been here 6 months. You wear a badge, you have a room, you have friends, you have me. When are you going to admit that this is your home?" The word hung in the air. Home. John had avoided thinking of it that way, kept telling himself this was temporary, that he was just helping out for a while. But Clara was right. Somewhere along the way, Dry Creek had become home. "I'm scared," John admitted. "Scared of caring this much. Scared that if I admit this is home, something will take it away." "Something might," Clara said gently. "That's life. But you can't protect yourself from loss by never having anything. All that does is guarantee you lose everything worth having." "When did you get so wise?" "When I got tied to a cross and decided dying wasn't worth it." She squeezed his hand. "I could have given up, could have signed Blackwood's papers, let him have everything. But I chose to fight because the land mattered, my father's memory mattered. And now I choose this, choose you, because you matter too." John pulled her close. "I love you," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it completely. No reservations, no fear holding him back. "I know," Clara said. "I've known for a while. I was just waiting for you to figure it out. Took me long enough. Some things are worth waiting for." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. In town, lamps were being lit. Somewhere a dog barked. Normal sounds, everyday sounds, the soundtrack of a life being lived. The 7th month brought a wedding. Not John and Clara's, neither of them was quite ready for that yet, though the idea was starting to feel less terrifying. Curtis Wade married a girl from the neighboring town, a quiet woman who worked at the general store and thought his reformed gunman story was romantic instead of horrifying. The whole town turned out for the ceremony. It was held at Clara's ranch, under the big oak tree by the creek. Magistrate Price, still in town tying up loose ends from Blackwood's case, performed the ceremony. It was simple, heartfelt, and Curtis cried through the whole thing. At the reception, John found himself talking to Tommy Morrison about the future. "The town's growing," Tommy said. "Got 3 new families moving in next month. Heard there might be more after that. Word's getting around that Dry Creek's a good place to start over." "That's good." "It is, but it means we're going to need more infrastructure, maybe a proper school, a second general store. Definitely going to need another deputy or 2. Tommy looked at him. "You thinking about staying long-term?" John glanced at Clara, who was dancing with Curtis's new wife, laughing at something the woman said. "Yeah," John said. "I think I am." "Good. Town needs you." "Town needs itself," John corrected. "I'm just helping out. However you want to frame it." Tommy clapped him on the shoulder. "But we're glad you're here." Later, John danced with Clara. Neither of them was particularly good at it, but they shuffled around together, comfortable in their awkwardness. "Curtis looks happy," Clara observed. "He is. Found something worth building a life around." "Sounds familiar?" John smiled. "Yeah, it does. Think you'll ever be ready for this? Wedding, commitment, the whole thing?" "Ask me in a few months." "I will," Clara promised. The 8th month was quiet, which was good. John and Curtis handled small disputes, broke up a few fights, kept the peace. Young Morrison was developing into a solid deputy, steady and fair, the kind of lawman the town needed. Pruitt was talking about retiring, maybe in a year or 2. I'm getting old, he told John. This job needs someone younger, someone who can handle the physical demands. You're not that old. Old enough to know my limits. Pruitt looked at John seriously. I want you to take over when I step down. Be sheriff. I don't know if I'm sheriff material. You're exactly sheriff material. The town trusts you, respects you. You've proven you can handle trouble and prevent it. That's the job. John didn't commit, but he didn't say no either. The idea of being sheriff, of being that permanently connected to Dry Creek, still scared him. But it was the kind of fear that came from possibility, not danger. The fear of hoping for something good. Clara's house had become a gathering place. Once a week, people came over for dinner. Pruitt, Curtis, and his wife, Tommy's family, Margaret Thornton and her husband, others. They'd eat together, talk about town business and personal news, building the kind of community that Blackwood had tried to destroy. One evening after everyone left, John helped Clara clean up as usual. When they finished, she poured 2 glasses of whiskey and led him to the porch. I've been thinking, she said. About? About us. About the future. She sat in her father's old rocking chair, the one they'd salvaged from the barn. I'm happy with how things are. No pressure, no rush, but I also wonder sometimes if we're being too careful. What do you mean? I mean, we're both so afraid of losing what we have that we're not letting ourselves have more. She looked at him over her glass. I love you, John. I want a future with you. Not someday, not eventually. Now. John felt his heart speed up. You want to get married. I want you to move in. I want to wake up with you every morning and go to sleep beside you every night. I want to build this life together instead of dancing around it. She paused. But only if you want that too. Only if you're ready. Was he ready? John had spent so long convincing himself he wasn't made for this kind of life. But sitting here on Clara's porch, looking at the home they'd built and the town they'd saved and the future spreading out ahead of them, he couldn't think of a single good reason to say no. I'm ready, he said. I'm scared, but I'm ready. Clara smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. Good, because I already cleared space in the closet for your things. Presumptuous. Confident, she corrected. There's a difference. John moved in the next week. It wasn't complicated. He didn't own much, had spent years traveling light. His few possessions fit in 2 saddlebags. But the significance was enormous. For the first time since Sarah died, John had a home that wasn't temporary, a place that was his. The nightmares stopped almost completely after that. Or maybe they didn't stop so much as transform. Instead of dreaming about Sarah's death, he started dreaming about her life. Good memories, things they'd done together, conversations they'd had. In one dream, she told him she was proud of him. He woke up crying, but it was the good kind of crying, the kind that healed instead of hurt. You all right? Clara asked, groggy with sleep. Yeah, just remembering. Good memories or bad? Good ones. He pulled her close. Finally, good ones. The 9th month brought change to Dry Creek in unexpected ways. A railroad company sent surveyors looking at the possibility of running a line through the valley. It would bring commerce, opportunity, and growth. The town council debated the pros and cons for weeks. Progress is coming whether we like it or not, Pruitt said at a town meeting. Question is whether we control it or let it control us. They voted to negotiate with the railroad, setting terms that would benefit the town without destroying what made it special. John sat in on the meetings, learning the politics of building something instead of just protecting it. It was harder than he expected, required patience and compromise and the ability to see multiple sides of an issue. You're getting good at this, Clara observed after one particularly contentious session. At what? At being part of a community, at building instead of breaking. Still prefer breaking sometimes. It's simpler. Simpler isn't always better. She was right, as usual. The complex work of maintaining a community, of balancing competing interests and finding solutions that worked for everyone, it was harder than any gunfight John had ever been in. But it was also more rewarding, more lasting. Curtis's wife was pregnant by the 10th month. Curtis was terrified and overjoyed in equal measure, kept asking John and Clara for advice, even though neither of them had children. What if I'm a terrible father? Curtis asked one night over dinner. You won't be, Clara assured him. You're already thinking about how to be good at it. That's half the battle. What's the other half? Showing up every day. Being there even when it's hard. She glanced at John. Choosing to stay even when you're scared. Curtis caught the look between them. You two getting married or what? Eventually, John said. Why not now? Because we're taking our time, Clara said, making sure we get it right. You're already living together. You're already committed. What's left to figure out? Details, John said, but he was smiling. Curtis had a point. That night, lying in bed with Clara, John brought it up. Curtis asked when we're getting married. I heard. What do you think? Clara was quiet for a moment. I think I don't need a ceremony to know we're committed, but I also think it might be nice. A celebration, a public acknowledgement of what we've built together. You want to get married? I want whatever you want. If a ceremony matters to you, we'll have one. If it doesn't, we won't. John thought about it. He'd never imagined himself getting married, had convinced himself that kind of life wasn't for him. But that was before Dry Creek, before Clara, before he learned that staying could be braver than running. Let's do it, he said. Not a big thing, just something simple. But yeah, let's make it official. Clara kissed him. Spring would be nice, when the wildflowers bloom. Spring it is. They set the date for early May, 6 months away. It gave them time to plan, time to let the idea settle, time to be sure. Not that John wasn't sure. He was. But there was something good about the anticipation, about having something to look forward to. The 11th month brought closure from an unexpected source. A letter arrived from the territorial prison, from Marcus Blackwood himself. Sheriff Pruitt brought it to John and Clara, unsure whether to open it. He's got no power anymore, Pruitt said, but I figured you should decide whether to read it. Clara took the letter, stared at it for a long moment. I don't want to read his excuses or his justifications. Then don't, John said. Throw it away. You don't owe him anything. But Clara opened it anyway. She read it silently, expression unchanging, then handed it to John. The letter was short, written in careful script. Miss Mallory, I don't expect forgiveness, nor do I deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did. Not just the legal charges, but the real harm. I destroyed lives, broke families, killed people for land that wasn't worth their blood. Your father was a good man. I know that now, though it's too late to matter. I'm not asking for mercy or sympathy. I'm simply acknowledging that you were right and I was wrong. For whatever it's worth, I'm sorry. Marcus Blackwood. Clara set the letter down. He's dying. How do you know? A man like Blackwood doesn't apologize unless he's facing something he can't buy or intimidate his way out of. Death's the only thing left. She looked at John. Do you think he means it? The apology? Probably. Fear of dying has a way of making people honest. Does it matter if he's sorry now? John thought about all the people Blackwood had hurt, all the lives destroyed. Matters to him, maybe. Gives him a chance to die with a clearer conscience, but it doesn't undo anything. No, Clara agreed. It doesn't. She burned the letter in the fireplace that night, not out of anger, but because she didn't need to carry it anymore. Blackwood's apology, genuine or not, didn't define her story. What defined her was what she'd built after he tried to destroy her. The 12th month arrived with winter's first snow. Dry Creek looked different, covered in white, cleaner somehow, like the snow was washing away the last traces of what it had been. John and Clara spent Christmas at their house with friends and chosen family. Curtis and his very pregnant wife, Pruitt, Tommy Morrison's family, Ben Watts surprisingly sober and coherent. They ate too much, drank moderately, told stories, and laughed. At one point, Curtis raised his glass. A toast. To the man who saved this town and decided to stay. I didn't save anything, John protested. You did, Curtis insisted. You saved me from being the man I was becoming. You saved this town from Blackwood. You saved yourself from running forever. That's worth celebrating. They drank to it, and John felt something unfamiliar. Pride, maybe. Or just acceptance. He'd spent so long thinking of himself as broken, as a tool for violence and nothing more. But these people saw something different. They saw someone worth keeping around, worth building a life with. Later, after everyone left, Clara and John sat by the fire. Outside, snow was falling steady and quiet. You happy? Clara asked. Yeah, John said, and meant it completely. I really am. No urge to run? Not tonight. Not anymore. He pulled her closer. I think I finally figured out what you meant about choosing to stay being brave. It's harder than leaving, requires more courage. But it's worth it. Took you long enough to learn that. Some of us are slow learners. She laughed, and they sat together watching the fire burn down to embers, comfortable in the silence, comfortable in each other. Spring came with a rush of color and growth. The wildflowers bloomed across Clara's land, painting the hills in purple and yellow and red. The town was thriving. The railroad had agreed to come through, bringing jobs and opportunity. 3 more families had moved in, and there was talk of building a proper schoolhouse. Curtis's baby was born in April, a healthy girl they named Sarah after John's sister. When Curtis told him, John had to step outside for a moment to collect himself. It was a gift, an acknowledgement, a way of saying that loss doesn't have to be the end of the story. The wedding was small, held at Clara's ranch under the same oak tree where Curtis had married. Magistrate Price performed the ceremony again, his words simple and heartfelt. Clara wore a dress Margaret Thornton had sewn, simple and beautiful. John wore his best clothes, the badge on his chest polished to a shine. They said their vows in front of the town that had become their family. John promised to stay, to build, to love her through whatever came. Clara promised the same. They exchanged simple rings, kissed, and it was done. The celebration afterward was everything a wedding should be, joyful, rowdy, full of laughter and dancing and too much food. John danced with Clara, with Curtis's wife, with Margaret Thornton. He shook hands with men who'd become friends, accepted congratulations from people who'd become community. At sunset, he found himself standing with Sheriff Pruitt, watching the celebration continue without them. "You did good, John," Pruitt said. "Built yourself a real life here. We all did, together." "True enough." Pruitt pulled out his badge, looked at it. "I'm retiring next month. I want you to take over as sheriff." "I know, you've mentioned it." "And?" John looked at the badge, at the symbol of responsibility and commitment and staying. A year ago, he would have said no immediately. But that was before he learned that roots could give strength instead of just vulnerability. "All right," John said. "I'll do it." Pruitt smiled, handed him the badge. "Wear it well." John pinned it next to his deputy badge, and something clicked into place. This was who he was now. Not a drifter, not a gun for hire, but a lawman, a husband, a member of a community, someone who stayed. Clara found him later, both badges gleaming on his chest. "Sheriff now?" "Apparently." "How does it feel?" "Heavy. Good, but heavy." "That's because it means something." She took his hand. "Come on, Sheriff, your wife wants to dance." They danced as the sun set and the stars came out. Around them, the town they'd saved and built and chosen celebrated. Children ran between the tables. Old friends told stories. New families found their place in the fabric of Dry Creek. This was what John had fought for, though he hadn't known it at the time. Not just stopping bad men or protecting the innocent, but creating space for life to flourish. Community, connection, the everyday miracle of people choosing to build something together instead of tear each other apart. Later, much later, after the celebration wound down and everyone went home, John and Clara stood on their porch looking out at the land they'd claimed and defended and made their own. "No regrets?" Clara asked. "None." "Not even a little urge to saddle up and ride?" John thought about it honestly. "No. This is where I'm supposed to be. With me. With you. With this town. With this life." He pulled her close. "I spent years running from ghosts, convinced that staying meant weakness. But you taught me different. Staying is the bravest thing I've ever done." "We taught each other," Clara said. "I taught you to stay. You taught me to fight." They stood together as night fell over Dry Creek, over the town that had learned to stand up for itself, that had chosen courage over fear. The cross where Clara had nearly died was long gone, replaced by a garden that Margaret Thornton tended. The Cordells' graves were unmarked and forgotten. Blackwood was dying in prison, powerless and alone. But the people they'd tried to destroy were thriving, living, building, growing, proving that evil could be beaten not just with violence, but with the simple act of refusing to give up, of choosing community over isolation, of standing together when it would be easier to fall apart. John had come to Dry Creek by accident, a stranger with no name and no intention of staying. He'd left behind a trail of towns he'd helped but never joined, convinced that connection was a weakness he couldn't afford. But Clara had shown him different. This town had shown him different. You couldn't build anything alone. You needed people, messy and complicated and imperfect as they were. You needed roots, even knowing that roots could be torn up. You needed to care, even knowing that caring meant risking loss. Because the alternative, running forever, never building anything, never letting anyone in, that wasn't protection. It was just a different kind of death. "What are you thinking about?" Clara asked. "About how I almost rode past this town. Almost kept going. But you didn't." "No, I saw you on that cross and I couldn't." John turned to face her fully. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. You know that, right?" "I know," she smiled. "We saved each other. That's how it works." They went inside to the home they'd built from ashes and determination, to the life they'd chosen over fear. Outside, Dry Creek slept peacefully, a town that had learned the hard way that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about giving people the chance to be better, to build something worth defending. John hung his hat by the door, set his gun belt on the table, and followed Clara to bed. Tomorrow he'd put the badge back on, patrol the streets, keep the peace. Tomorrow he'd be sheriff, would carry the responsibility of protecting this place and these people. But tonight he was just a man who'd found his way home, who'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to build despite it. Who'd discovered that the strongest thing you could do wasn't to stand alone, but to stand with others. The cross was gone. The fear was gone. Blackwood was gone. But Dry Creek remained. And so did John, finally at peace with the man he'd become. Finally home.
Back, everyone. We are going to be listening to Fred again and Thomas. I'm going to butcher his name, but he's one of the guys from oh my gosh, from Daft Punk. Thank you, Gibby. Thank you. Of course, I have hair everywhere too. I'm just shedding like crazy today. But yeah. So hopefully we can get this. I'm hoping we can get to the main bulk of this tonight. That'll be awesome. But I think we will get it done. Did I use the right pronouns for you? Yes. It's typically it's she they. It's either. You can use either. Thank you for asking, Gia. I appreciate it. Publicly, like in spaces I don't know folks, I will use she, her more than they, them. I prefer they, them. But the thing is that because of certain things in the world today, I try to protect myself as best as I can. But yeah. TLDR. The TLDR of it all. But yes, I do use those pronouns. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. If I could have seen them live, my God, I would have just like gone bananas. Been fucking phenomenal. Someday, someday. Oh, I think I'm going to have to get this fixed. I think I'm going to have to print a new one. Of course, of course. Oh, yeah, no, totally understand that completely. Much love to your friend, Gio.